Hello there, and welcome to Life Beyond Scene, a place where curiosity slows down a little, explanations stay gentle, and science is allowed to unfold at a calm, comfortable pace. This channel has always been about exploring things that sit just outside everyday notice. Sometimes that means space, sometimes the mind, sometimes history, and tonight it brings us to a stretch of water that many people think they understand until they look a bit closer. The topic tonight sounds simple at first. Ships keep sinking in the Great Lakes. Not occasionally, not only in the distant past, but often enough that maritime historians, shipping companies, and local communities continue talking about it today. Thousands of vessels have gone down there over the last 2 centuries. Some were small fishing boats, others were enormous cargo ships built with modern engineering, radar, satellite navigation, reinforced hulls, experienced crews, and detailed weather forecasts. Even with all that preparation, ships still end up resting on lake beds that are sometimes hundreds of feet deep. It might sound surprising because these lakes sit far inland. They are freshwater. They are surrounded by cities, highways, farms, forests, and neighbourhoods, where daily life looks completely ordinary. No palm trees bending in hurricane winds, no tropical storms forming out of nowhere, no vast ocean horizon that makes you feel tiny. Many people picture them as large but manageable bodies of water, closer to oversized lakes used for recreation than to anything resembling the open sea. That impression lasts until you start hearing accounts from sailors who work there regularly. They talk about waves taller than buildings, sudden weather changes, visibility that disappears in minutes, freezing water that drains strength rapidly, and navigation conditions that require constant attention. Before getting deeper into all of that, it helps to slow down for a moment. Think about where you are right now while listening. Maybe you're at home, maybe commuting, maybe winding down before sleep. Where in the world are you listening from tonight, and what time is it there at this very moment? The idea is fitting because the Great Lakes stretch across time zones, climates and communities, yet the water connects them all in a very practical way. Cargo moves through those lakes constantly. Iron ore, grain, coal, stone, manufactured goods. The shipping routes remain busy because the lakes form one of the most efficient transportation corridors in North America. If this kind of slow exploration feels relaxing or interesting, feel free to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people find this quiet corner where complicated topics are unpacked calmly instead of rushed through. No pressure, just an open invitation. Now, settling into the subject itself, the first thing worth noticing is that shipwrecks in the Great Lakes are not rare accidents that happen once every few decades. Historical records estimate over 6,000 documented wrecks, and many experts believe the real number is higher because early losses were not always recorded properly. Some vessels disappeared before radio communication existed. Others sank during storms where survivors never made it back to shore. Cold freshwater preserves wreckage exceptionally well, so divers still discover ships that look eerily intact decades or even more than a century later. One of the reasons people underestimate the lakes is size perception. Lake Superior alone covers more surface area than some entire countries. Its deepest point reaches over 400 meters. When wind travels across that much uninterrupted water, waves build the same way they do on oceans. Sailors refer to this as fetch. The distance wind can blow without obstruction. Long fetch produces larger waves. On Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie and Ontario, fetch can extend for hundreds of kilometers depending on wind direction. That means storm conditions can escalate quickly even though you remain far from any ocean coastline. Another factor is temperature. Fresh water cools differently than salt water, and the Great Lakes often remain extremely cold below the surface even in summer. When accidents happen, that cold water shortens survival time drastically. Hypothermia sets in faster than many people expect. Crews train for it, ships carry safety gear, but emergencies do not always allow perfect response. Weather forecasting has improved a lot over the last century, yet the lakes still produce localized storms that are difficult to predict precisely. Air masses moving across North America collide there frequently. Warm southern air meets colder northern air. Pressure systems shift quickly. A calm morning can turn into heavy wind and steep waves by afternoon. Mariners sometimes describe the experience as the lake-changing mood without warning, although the scientific explanation involves temperature gradients, wind shear, and atmospheric pressure differences rather than anything mysterious. There is also geography to consider. Unlike oceans with gradual continental shelves, the Great Lakes contain complex underwater topography. Reefs, shoals, sandbars, and rocky outcrops sit below the surface in places that charts mark clearly but still demand careful navigation. Visibility can drop because of fog, rain, snow, or darkness, increasing the challenge. Electronic navigation helps, yet human interpretation remains essential, and fatigue or distraction can introduce risk. Shipping itself brings additional complications. Large cargo vessels on the lakes, often called lakers, carry massive loads of raw materials. Weight distribution matters. Stability calculations must remain precise. If cargo shifts during rough weather, balance changes. Engineers design holds and loading procedures to minimize that possibility, but extreme conditions sometimes push beyond design assumptions. Historical context also matters. Earlier centuries saw wooden ships, limited forecasting, basic navigation tools, and minimal communication. Losses were more frequent then. Some wrecks date back to the 1800s when industrial expansion depended heavily on lake shipping. Ore from Minnesota fed steel mills in the Midwest. Grain moved east, timber travelled south. Demand encouraged rapid shipping schedules, sometimes despite deteriorating weather. That combination contributed to numerous disasters. Modern vessels benefit from radar, GPS, satellite communication, reinforced hull construction, advanced meteorology, and strict safety regulations. Despite these improvements, accidents still occur. Investigations usually reveal a combination of factors rather than a single cause. Weather interacts with human decision-making. Mechanical issues appear at inconvenient moments. Visibility drops. Waves intensify. A chain of small problems becomes a serious emergency. There is also the simple fact that water remains unforgiving. Freshwater does not reduce impact forces. Waves do not become gentler because they are inland. Ships respond to physics, not geography labels. A 100-metre vessel facing steep, closely spaced waves experiences stress on its hull, cargo, propulsion system, and crew coordination. When multiple stressors line up, even experienced teams face difficult situations. Public attention spikes when a major ship goes down. Names like the Edmund Fitzgerald still resonate because that incident involved a large modern freighter, lost in 1975 during a severe November storm on Lake Superior. The wreck became widely known through news coverage, investigations, and cultural references, yet it represents just one event in a long pattern. Divers exploring wreck sites often report remarkably preserved conditions because cold fresh water slows biological decay. Paint, railings, cargo equipment, and even interior spaces sometimes remain recognizable. That preservation turns the lakes into underwater historical archives, though accessing them requires expertise and caution due to depth, temperature, and visibility. Communities around the lakes maintain strong maritime traditions. Museums, memorials, and historical societies document losses carefully. Families connected to shipping industries treat the subject with respect rather than sensationalism. For them, it involves real people, livelihoods, and regional identity. Commercial necessity keeps shipping active despite risks. Rail and road transport exist, yet water transport remains highly efficient for bulk materials. A single large freighter can carry the equivalent of hundreds of rail cars. Fuel consumption per ton is lower. Infrastructure supports continuous movement through locks, canals, and ports connecting the lakes to the Atlantic via the St. Lawrence Seaway. Seasonal changes add another layer. Winter brings ice formation that can damage hulls, restrict movement, or require icebreaker assistance. Spring thaw introduces floating debris and shifting water conditions. Autumn storms intensify as temperature contrasts grow sharper. Mariners adjust schedules, but economic demands continue. Technology helps manage risk, but never removes it completely. Radar can detect obstacles, but depends on interpretation. GPS provides position data, but cannot control weather. Structural engineering increases resilience, but has limits. Human judgment ties all those tools together, and humans, as everyone knows, vary in experience, alertness, and stress tolerance. Sometimes the most important element is decision timing. Turning back early during worsening weather can prevent disaster. Waiting too long may leave insufficient safe options. Investigations frequently examine communication between captains, shipping companies, weather services, and nearby vessels to understand how decisions developed. Another practical consideration involves wave patterns unique to enclosed basins. The Great Lakes sometimes produce steep, closely spaced waves rather than the longer swells typical in oceans. That pattern affects ship handling. Pitching and rolling motions interact differently with hull design, increasing mechanical strain and cargo stress. Navigation routes also pass through constricted channels, harbour entrances, and lock systems. Manoeuvring large vessels in those spaces requires precision, especially during poor visibility or strong crosswinds. Tug assistance helps, but coordination remains critical. There is a tendency among casual observers to assume inland equals safe, but shipping professionals usually adopt the opposite mindset. They treat the lakes with the same respect given to oceans because conditions justify that caution. Training programs emphasize situational awareness, weather interpretation, emergency drills, and equipment maintenance. Even recreational boaters encounter similar issues on a smaller scale. Sudden weather shifts catch people unprepared. Cold water surprises swimmers. Navigation errors lead to groundings. The scale differs, but underlying environmental factors remain consistent. All of this gradually builds a clearer picture. Ships keep sinking in the Great Lakes not because of a single dramatic cause, but because multiple realistic factors combine. Large water surface area, rapid weather changes, cold temperatures, complex underwater geography, heavy cargo demands, seasonal ice, and human operational variables. None of those elements are mysterious individually, yet together they create an environment that demands continuous attention. And once you begin looking at the lakes through that practical lens, the inland setting starts to feel less reassuring and more like a reminder that water anywhere follows the same physical rules. Size, wind energy, temperature gradients, and navigation complexity matter more than distance from an ocean coastline. From here, it helps to look more closely at how these lakes function physically, because understanding their behaviour explains why sailors often describe them as inland seas rather than lakes in the casual sense. And that shift in perspective leads naturally into how weather, waves, and geography interact in ways that continue shaping shipping risks today. When people first hear the phrase Great Lakes, the word lake tends to shape expectations immediately. A lake sounds contained, predictable, something you can see across from one shore to another, something that behaves calmly most of the time. Yet once you spend any real time looking at the scale involved here, that assumption starts falling apart. These bodies of water operate less like typical lakes and far more like enclosed seas, and that distinction turns out to matter a lot when trying to understand why ships sometimes struggle there. Take Lake Superior as a starting point. It stretches roughly 560 kilometers from west to east, and about 250 kilometers north to south at its widest. That is a distance large enough that weather systems can build uninterrupted across open water. Standing on one shore, you often cannot see the opposite side. The horizon looks identical to what you would expect on an ocean. The same holds true to varying degrees for Lakes Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario. Together they contain about 1/5 of the world's surface freshwater supply. That volume alone begins explaining why their behaviour differs from smaller inland lakes. Wind interaction is one of the first practical consequences. Meteorologists use the term fetch to describe how far wind can travel across water without obstruction. Longer fetch produces larger waves because energy transfers steadily from air to water. On small lakes, fetch stays limited by shoreline distance, so waves remain relatively modest. On the Great Lakes, fetch can extend hundreds of kilometers depending on wind direction. Sustained winds across that distance generate waves comparable to those on coastal oceans. Ships encountering those conditions must respond exactly as they would at sea, adjusting speed, heading, and stability management carefully. Freshwater composition changes things in subtle ways too. Saltwater has slightly higher density than freshwater, which increases buoyancy. Ships floating in freshwater sit marginally lower in the water than they would in oceans. That difference sounds small, but over a large hull carrying heavy cargo, it becomes operationally significant. Engineers factor it into loading calculations, draft limits, and stability margins. Reduced buoyancy also means waves interact with hulls differently, influencing how vessels pitch and roll. Temperature stratification adds another layer. Oceans show temperature layering, but the Great Lakes experience strong seasonal variation because they freeze partially in winter and warm unevenly in summer. Surface water can warm considerably, while deeper water stays cold year-round. That temperature contrast affects water density and mixing patterns. It also influences fog formation when warm air passes over colder water. Fog reduces visibility quickly, complicating navigation even with modern radar because smaller hazards or other vessels may not register clearly under certain conditions. Currents exist there as well, although they do not resemble large ocean currents like the Gulf Stream. Instead, wind-driven surface currents, seaches, and basin-wide circulation patterns develop. A seach is essentially a standing wave oscillation within an enclosed body of water, often triggered by atmospheric pressure changes or sustained wind. Water piles up on one side, then sloshes back once wind relaxes. Harbour levels can rise or fall noticeably over short periods. Ships moored or manoeuvring in ports must account for that motion. Another ocean-like feature involves storm development. Extratropical cyclones passing across North America frequently intensify over the lakes, due to temperature contrast between land and water. The lakes can provide heat and moisture similar to smaller versions of oceanic storm fuel processes. Rapid pressure drops increase wind speeds, wave heights, and precipitation intensity. Mariners sometimes refer to these as November gales, because late autumn produces particularly strong conditions as cold continental air masses interact with relatively warmer lake water. Wave shape differs slightly from ocean swells. Ocean waves often travel long distances, smoothing into longer periods between crests. On the Great Lakes, limited basin size tends to produce shorter wave periods with steeper faces. For ships, that means more frequent pitching and slamming forces. Hull stress accumulates differently than in long ocean swells. Cargo securing systems must handle sharper motion cycles, which increases wear over time. Depth variation also plays a role. While some parts of the lakes are very deep, other regions contain abrupt shallows, reefs, or submerged rock formations. Wave interaction with uneven bottom topography can amplify height locally. Mariners call these confused seas because wave directions and sizes vary unpredictably. Navigation charts mark hazards carefully, yet heavy weather can reduce reaction time if a vessel approaches shallower areas while managing large waves. Visibility conditions frequently resemble maritime environments too. Fog banks develop quickly when temperature and humidity align. Snow squalls occur in winter due to lake effect processes where cold air moving over relatively warmer water picks up moisture, then releases it as intense localized snowfall downwind. These squalls can reduce visibility to near zero within minutes. Radar assists, but ice accumulation on equipment, signal clutter, or small target size still present complications. Watercolor and clarity influence perception as well. Freshwater lakes can appear deceptively calm because wave colour contrasts differ from saltwater. Observers unfamiliar with maritime cues sometimes underestimate wave height until conditions worsen. Professional crews trained to read wind patterns, cloud formation, barometric pressure trends, and surface texture rather than relying on casual visual impressions. Shipping routes across the lakes often resemble open sea transit more than inland navigation. Vessels travel long distances between ports without immediate shoreline reference. Electronic navigation becomes primary. Celestial navigation historically served as backup before GPS, much like ocean voyages. That operational similarity reinforces why experienced sailors treat the lakes as inland seas rather than oversized ponds. Thermal inertia contributes too. Large water volumes change temperature slowly compared to surrounding land. That moderates regional climate but also sustains weather instability. Storm systems crossing land may weaken, then intensify again over the lakes. Forecast models account for that, yet small timing variations affect actual conditions encountered by ships. Acoustic propagation behaves differently over water, especially large bodies. Sound travels efficiently across the lakes, which historically helped foghorn navigation before modern electronics. However, reliance on acoustic signals requires coordination and still leaves room for misunderstanding during heavy weather. Ice formation deserves attention because it differs from ocean pack ice in structure. Freshwater ice tends to form smoother sheets but can break into large moving flows during wind events. Ships navigating late-season routes must avoid pressure ridges capable of damaging hull plating. Ice accumulation on decks, superstructures, and rigging increases top weight, affecting stability. Human perception often struggles with scale when surrounded by land. Calling them lakes implies boundaries and predictability, yet operational experience contradicts that. Mariners quickly learn to treat them with the same caution used at sea. Continuous weather monitoring, strict maintenance schedules, detailed voyage planning, and emergency readiness drills. Another ocean-like trait involves biological activity affecting visibility and water characteristics. Algae blooms, sediment suspension, and organic matter can alter water density slightly, affect propeller efficiency, and influence sonar readings. These factors rarely cause accidents directly, but contribute to the broader operational picture. Harbour approaches resemble coastal port navigation too. Breakwaters, dredged channels, lighthouses, buoys, and pilot services guide vessels through constrained entry points. Crosswinds funneling through harbour mouths complicate steering. Tugboats assist larger freighters, mirroring ocean port procedures. Historical ship design adapted specifically for these conditions. Lakers often feature long, relatively narrow hulls, optimized for lock transit yet reinforced for steep wave encounters. Cargo holds emphasize bulk efficiency for iron ore, coal, limestone, or grain. Structural stress calculations incorporate freshwater buoyancy differences and seasonal ice exposure. Communication infrastructure also parallels ocean shipping. Coast Guard stations, weather buoys, satellite data links, automated identification systems, and emergency response protocols operate continuously. Despite technological advances, coordination among multiple agencies remains essential because environmental conditions shift rapidly. Recreational and commercial traffic share space, adding complexity. Fishing boats, ferries, research vessels, and cargo ships operate simultaneously. Traffic separation schemes exist in certain areas, but open water crossings still require vigilance from all operators. Economic incentives sustain high traffic volumes. Transporting bulk materials by water remains cost-effective compared to rail or trucking. That efficiency encourages year-round operations whenever ice conditions permit. Continuous activity increases exposure to environmental hazards statistically. Public awareness fluctuates. Major shipwreck anniversaries or news coverage temporarily highlight risks, but everyday shipping continues mostly unnoticed by those living inland. Mariners maintain awareness constantly because their work environment demands it. From a physical standpoint, the classification difference between lake and sea becomes less relevant than size, depth, fetch, temperature gradients, and atmospheric interaction. Those variables define behavior. The Great Lakes meet many criteria typically associated with inland seas, even if geography labels them otherwise. Understanding that helps explain why shipping accidents cannot be dismissed as unusual anomalies. The environment produces legitimate maritime conditions requiring professional seamanship. When those conditions intensify, risks increase just as they do on oceans. That realization naturally leads toward weather specifically, because atmospheric variability sits at the center of many incidents. Rapid storm development, seasonal wind patterns, pressure fluctuations, and temperature contrasts all shape what crews encounter daily, and examining those weather dynamics makes the ongoing pattern of ship incidents easier to understand without needing dramatic explanations. If there is one factor that crews working the Great Lakes learn to respect very quickly, it is weather that refuses to stay predictable for long. Forecasts help, satellite imagery helps, radar helps, and meteorology has advanced enormously compared with a century ago, yet conditions on these inland seas still shift fast enough to surprise even experienced captains. That unpredictability sits quietly behind many incidents, not always as the sole cause, but often as the factor that turns manageable situations into emergencies. Part of the reason comes down to geography. The Great Lakes lie in the path of competing air masses moving across North America. Cold, dry air frequently descends from the north and northwest, while warmer, more humid air travels up from the south. When those air masses collide over large open water, instability develops. Temperature differences create pressure gradients. Pressure gradients create wind. Wind interacting with large fetch produces waves. That chain of events can accelerate in hours rather than days. It sometimes starts subtly. A barometer drops slightly. Cloud formations shift. Wind direction changes by a few degrees. On land, those signals might barely register, but on open water they carry operational meaning. Crews monitor these indicators continuously because they know that what begins as moderate wind can escalate quickly, especially during transitional seasons like autumn and spring. Autumn deserves special mention. During late fall, the lakes often remain relatively warm after absorbing summer heat, while surrounding land cools faster. Cold air sweeping over warmer water picks up moisture and energy. That interaction can intensify low-pressure systems, producing strong winds, heavy precipitation, and steep waves. Mariners sometimes refer to late-season storms informally as November gales, not because storms occur only in November, but because that period historically produces some of the most severe conditions. Visibility often deteriorates alongside these changes. Rain bands, snow squalls, and fog banks can reduce sightlines drastically. Fog in particular forms when warm, moist air crosses colder water, condensing into suspended droplets. On the Great Lakes, that process can unfold quickly. A clear horizon becomes opaque in minutes. Navigation equipment compensates to an extent, but radar interpretation requires skill, and small craft or floating debris may not appear clearly. Wind behaviour over large freshwater basins also differs slightly from land patterns. Water surfaces reduce friction compared with terrain filled with buildings, trees, or hills. Less friction allows wind to maintain higher speeds. Gusts can remain sustained rather than dissipating. When winds align with the longest dimension of a lake, fetch maximizes and wave energy builds accordingly. Wave development itself creates secondary hazards. Steep waves cause vessels to pitch forward and back or roll side to side. Cargo shifts become more likely. Mechanical stress increases on engines, propeller shafts, hull plating, and deck equipment. Fatigue accumulates among crew members managing continuous adjustments. Even minor mechanical weaknesses can become critical under sustained motion. Lightning and electrical storms add complications too. Communication systems, navigation electronics, and deck operations all require caution during thunderstorms. While ships include grounding systems and surge protection, Severe electrical activity still presents operational interruptions. Crew safety procedures slow certain activities, affecting response timing. Temperature swings influence precipitation type. Early winter storms sometimes produce freezing rain rather than snow. Ice accumulation on exposed surfaces increases top weight on ships, altering stability. Deck equipment, railings, antennas, and lifeboat housings can accumulate ice rapidly in the right conditions. Crews must remove it manually when safe, but heavy weather may limit opportunities. Lake effect snow represents another unique phenomenon. Cold air moving over relatively warmer water absorbs moisture, then releases it as intense localized snowfall when reaching downwind shorelines. Ships crossing those zones encounter abrupt visibility reduction, combined with wind-driven snow that obscures navigation lights and radar returns. Conditions may improve dramatically only a few kilometers away, but while inside that band, operational difficulty rises sharply. Pressure systems sometimes stall over the lakes, prolonging adverse conditions. Instead of a storm passing within hours, wind and waves persist for days. Prolonged exposure tests equipment endurance and crew stamina. Fuel consumption increases as ships maintain position or adjust course repeatedly. Scheduling pressures occasionally tempt operators to continue voyages despite deteriorating forecasts, introducing decision complexity. Forecast accuracy continues improving, but microclimates over the lakes remain challenging. Water temperature variations, shoreline geometry, and atmospheric layering influence localized outcomes. A forecast covering an entire lake may not capture smaller-scale wind shifts affecting a specific shipping lane. Captains combine official forecasts with onboard observations and experience-based judgment. Another subtle issue involves wave interference patterns. When wind direction shifts while waves from a previous system still propagate, intersecting wave trains create irregular surfaces sometimes described as confused seas. Ships experience multi-directional motion that complicates steering and stability. Predicting exact wave interaction remains difficult even with modern modelling. Nighttime operations add additional strain. Darkness reduces visual cues crews rely on even with electronic assistance. Storm conditions combined with night navigation require heightened concentration. Fatigue management becomes essential because long hours of vigilance degrade reaction time. Seasonal transition periods also produce rapid fog formation and dissipation cycles. Sunrise heating can clear fog quickly, while sunset cooling may recreate it just as fast. Crews adapt continuously, adjusting speed, lookout protocols, and communication with nearby vessels. Weather radar aboard ships helps track precipitation intensity, but interpretation requires training. Heavy rain can produce clutter. Ice crystals in snowstorms behave differently from raindrops on radar returns. Operators distinguish between true hazards and false echoes through experience. Communication with shore-based weather services remains constant. Marine weather bulletins, buoy data, satellite imagery, and automated weather stations provide updates. Still, there is always a lag between measurement, analysis, dissemination, and operational response. During fast-developing events, conditions on the water may outrun forecast updates. Waterspouts occasionally occur as well. These rotating columns resemble small tornadoes forming over water. Most remain weak, but encountering one unexpectedly still demands evasive action. Their formation depends on atmospheric instability, temperature gradients and wind shear, all present periodically over the lakes. Cold water itself intensifies consequences when accidents occur during storms. Survival times shorten drastically. Rescue operations become harder in heavy seas. Helicopters, rescue boats, and emergency crews coordinate carefully, but response windows can narrow quickly when hypothermia risk rises. Human factors intersect with weather continuously. Fatigue from long watches, stress during heavy weather, communication clarity, and decision timing all matter. Training programs emphasize crew resource management, encouraging open communication so junior crew members feel comfortable reporting observations that might otherwise go unnoticed. Economic considerations sometimes complicate weather decisions. Delaying cargo deliveries affects schedules, contracts, and port operations. Companies invest heavily in forecasting support to balance safety with operational efficiency. Most captains prioritize safety, but the underlying pressure remains part of the professional environment. Historical records illustrate patterns. Many documented wrecks correlate with severe storms, especially during transitional seasons. Analysis of accident reports often reveals a cascade: weather deterioration, visibility reduction, mechanical stress, navigation challenge, then an initiating incident like grounding, cargo shift, or equipment failure. Technological progress reduces some risks but introduces others. Advanced navigation systems depend on electrical reliability. Redundancy exists, yet severe weather occasionally disrupts multiple systems simultaneously. Crews train for manual navigation backups, but switching modes under stress requires discipline. Public perception sometimes imagines storms arriving dramatically, yet many begin gradually. A moderate breeze strengthens, clouds thicken, rain starts lightly. Only later do conditions reach critical levels. Recognizing early warning signs remains essential, especially because turning a large freighter around takes time and space. Shoreline geometry also affects storm intensity locally. Bays funnel wind, peninsulas redirect wave energy, narrow channels amplify current speeds. Mariners incorporate geographic awareness alongside meteorological data when planning routes. Climate variability introduces longer-term considerations. Some studies suggest changes in storm frequency, ice cover duration, and temperature gradients affecting lake weather behaviour. Researchers continue evaluating data trends, but operational crews focus on immediate conditions rather than long-range climate projections during voyages. Weather unpredictability fosters a culture of caution among seasoned sailors. They learn to interpret subtle environmental cues, cloud base height, wind smell, water surface texture, barometric pressure trends. These observations complement instrument readings rather than replacing them. Training simulators now replicate Great Lakes storm scenarios specifically. Bridge simulators expose crews to steep wave encounters, low visibility navigation, and rapid weather transitions in controlled settings. That preparation improves reaction confidence when real situations arise. Emergency preparedness drills include abandoned ship procedures, distress communication, firefighting, flooding control, and cold water survival. Weather often triggers emergencies indirectly, so integrating meteorological awareness into safety training remains standard practice. Insurance assessments and regulatory oversight incorporate weather risk modelling. Classification societies evaluate vessel design resilience. Government agencies maintain navigation aids, weather buoys, and rescue infrastructure, partly because environmental unpredictability justifies ongoing investment. Despite all this preparation, uncertainty never disappears completely. That reality shapes the mindset of those working these waters. Respect replaces complacency. Experience informs caution. Even routine voyages receive full attention because conditions can change faster than assumptions. And once weather begins influencing wave development directly, another set of physical processes comes into focus. Wind speed, fetch length, basin shape, and wave interference determine how surface motion evolves, and understanding how inland waters generate ocean-scale waves makes the broader picture clearer without needing dramatic storytelling. There is something about water temperature that people tend to underestimate until they experience it directly. Warm air can give a false sense of security, especially in late spring or summer when the sun feels comfortable on your skin. Yet just below that pleasant surface, the Great Lakes often remain strikingly cold. That temperature difference plays a major role in maritime safety, and when ships encounter trouble, it quickly becomes one of the most serious factors affecting survival. Unlike smaller lakes that warm relatively quickly, the Great Lakes hold enormous volumes of water. Water absorbs heat slowly and releases it slowly, which means seasonal warming lags behind air temperature. Even in midsummer, deeper layers remain cold enough to induce hypothermia in minutes rather than hours. Surface temperatures might reach levels suitable for swimming near shore, but farther out, especially where ships operate, temperatures drop significantly. This characteristic matters because maritime emergencies rarely happen under ideal conditions. When a vessel experiences mechanical trouble, structural damage, or severe weather, crew members may need to abandon ship or work on exposed decks for extended periods. Cold water exposure becomes a critical risk long before rescue operations can arrive. Hypothermia, the medical condition resulting from body heat loss exceeding heat production, develops faster in water than in air. Water conducts heat away from the body roughly 25 times faster than air at the same temperature. That difference explains why people can tolerate cool air comfortably, yet struggle quickly in similarly cool water. For sailors, understanding that heat transfer dynamic is not abstract science. It shapes safety procedures, clothing requirements, and emergency drills. Initial cold shock represents the first danger. Sudden immersion in cold water triggers an involuntary gasp reflex. If a person's face is submerged during that reflex, water inhalation becomes likely. Rapid breathing follows, sometimes accompanied by panic, disorientation, and loss of motor coordination. Even strong swimmers can find themselves unable to control breathing effectively during those first critical moments. After cold shock, swimming ability declines as muscles cool. Dexterity drops. Simple tasks like fastening flotation devices or climbing into lifeboats become harder. Coordination loss can appear within minutes depending on water temperature. Professional crews train extensively with immersion suits and flotation equipment, precisely because practice reduces panic and improves response time. Immersion suits, sometimes called survival suits, provide thermal insulation and buoyancy. Modern commercial vessels carry them for each crew member. They are designed for rapid donning, often within 1 minute. Still, emergencies do not always provide perfect preparation time. Rough seas, darkness, or sudden mechanical failure can complicate access to equipment. Rescue timelines vary widely. Coast Guard units, nearby vessels, helicopters, and rescue boats respond as quickly as possible, yet distance, weather, and communication delays influence arrival time. In cold water, survival windows narrow significantly. That reality drives strict safety regulations governing shipping operations in these lakes. Even without full immersion, prolonged exposure to cold spray and wind can reduce body temperature. Wet clothing accelerates heat loss. Deck crews working during storms face cumulative cooling effects. Protective gear helps, but physical exertion, fatigue, and stress interact with environmental conditions continuously. Cold water also affects equipment performance. Metal becomes more brittle at low temperatures. Lubricants thicken. Hydraulic systems respond differently. Electrical components face condensation issues when temperature gradients fluctuate. Engineers design ships to accommodate these conditions, but maintenance routines remain essential. Historical incident analyses frequently highlight temperature as a decisive factor. Some wreck survivors reported functioning normally initially, then experiencing rapid physical decline once exposed to water. Rescue reports often emphasize how quickly hypothermia symptoms appeared, compared with expectations. Freshwater itself influences buoyancy differently than salt water. Lower density reduces flotation slightly, which means survival equipment must compensate accordingly. Life jackets designed for freshwater environments account for that factor, ensuring adequate buoyant force even with heavy clothing or equipment. Ice formation introduces additional complexity. During colder months, floating ice can surround vessels, complicate rescue approaches, or damage lifeboats. Ice accumulation on decks increases slip hazards. crew movement becomes slower and more cautious, affecting emergency response speed. Communication during cold weather emergencies requires clarity. Gloves reduce dexterity when operating radios or signaling devices. Batteries drain faster in cold conditions. Backup communication protocols exist precisely because primary systems sometimes falter under temperature stress. Medical response teams train specifically for cold water rescue. Rewarming procedures must proceed carefully to avoid complications like cardiac arrhythmias. Survivors often require gradual warming, oxygen support, and monitoring for secondary conditions such as aspiration pneumonia if water inhalation occurred. Public awareness campaigns around the Great Lakes frequently stress wearing life jackets even for recreational boating. Many accidents involve individuals who assume they could swim briefly to safety. Cold water reality contradicts that assumption consistently. Professional mariners internalize those lessons early in their careers. Cargo considerations intersect with temperature too. Some bulk materials behave differently when exposed to moisture and cold. Grain, coal or ore can freeze together, affecting weight distribution and unloading procedures. Engineers factor these variables into voyage planning and cargo securing methods. Psychological effects also deserve attention. Working continuously in cold environments increases fatigue and stress. Concentration may decline subtly over long shifts. Training emphasizes hydration, nutrition, and scheduled rest to mitigate these effects. Meteorological conditions often combine cold water with wind chill. Air temperature alone does not determine heat loss rate. Wind increases convective heat transfer, making deck work more demanding. Protective clothing systems include multiple layers to trap insulating air while allowing moisture escape. The lake's thermal inertia influences seasonal transition timing. Spring warming occurs later than inland areas. Early season recreational boaters sometimes misjudge water temperature based on warm land conditions. Professional shipping schedules account for this lag, maintaining cold weather protocols longer than casual observers might expect. Emergency drills aboard ships frequently simulate cold water scenarios specifically. Crew members practice rapid suit donning, lifeboat launching, distress communication, and passenger assistance under timed conditions. Repetition builds muscle memory, reducing hesitation during actual emergencies. Technological developments continue improving safety. Advanced immersion suits provide better insulation while allowing greater mobility. Personal locator beacons enhance rescue coordination. Thermal imaging equipment assists search operations in low visibility. Insurance assessments and regulatory frameworks incorporate temperature risk modelling. Classification societies evaluate vessel readiness for cold water operations. Inspection regimes verify equipment condition before shipping seasons begin. Historical ship design evolution reflects these environmental realities. Hull strengthening, heating systems, insulation standards, and deck equipment specifications all consider cold water exposure. Lessons learned from past incidents inform current engineering practices continuously. Community memory around the lakes often includes stories emphasizing cold water risk. Museums, maritime memorials, and training centres share those accounts not for dramatic effect, but for practical education. Experience passed down across generations reinforces caution. Cold water research continues. Universities and maritime institutes study hypothermia progression, survival equipment efficiency, and rescue techniques. Findings translate into updated safety recommendations and equipment standards. Climate trends introduce additional questions. Reduced winter ice cover in some years extends shipping seasons, increasing cold water exposure duration. Warmer surface temperatures do not eliminate deep water cold layers, so survival considerations remain relevant. Professional mariners generally treat temperature with the same seriousness as weather forecasts or mechanical readiness. It is part of routine situational awareness, rather than an occasional concern. That mindset reflects accumulated knowledge rather than theoretical caution. And when cold water combines with wind-driven surface motion, another important factor emerges: wave development, shape, and timing influence how ships respond physically, how cargo behaves, and how crews operate during storms, which naturally leads into looking more closely at how inland waters generate significant waves, even without ocean tides or long-distance swells. One of the first things sailors notice when they begin working the Great Lakes is how quickly the water surface can change character. A calm crossing in the morning sometimes turns into steep, restless waves by afternoon, even when the sky does not initially look dramatic. That shift rarely happens without physical explanation, yet the timing often feels abrupt because wave development depends on several interacting factors rather than one obvious trigger. Understanding how inland seas generate large waves helps clarify why ships occasionally encounter conditions comparable to coastal oceans, despite being far from saltwater shorelines. Wind remains the primary driver. When air moves across water, friction transfers energy into the surface. Small ripples form first. As wind persists, those ripples grow into waves. The longer wind continues blowing across uninterrupted water, the larger waves become. That uninterrupted distance is what meteorologists call fetch. On the Great Lakes, fetch can stretch hundreds of kilometres. Lake Superior in particular offers enough open distance for sustained winds to build waves that rival ocean swells in height, though their shape often differs. Wave height alone does not tell the full story. Wave period, the time between crests, also matters. Oceans typically produce longer period swells because waves travel vast distances before reaching shorelines. On the Great Lakes, basin size limits how far waves travel before encountering land. As a result, waves tend to be shorter in period and steeper. For ships, that means more frequent pitching motion, stronger impacts against the hull, and higher mechanical stress over time. Wind direction changes introduce another complication. If wind shifts while earlier waves are still moving, new waves intersect older ones. The resulting pattern produces irregular surfaces sometimes called confused seas. Steering through those conditions demands constant attention because wave direction and intensity vary unpredictably. Mechanical loads fluctuate accordingly, testing structural resilience and cargo stability. Atmospheric pressure also plays a role. Rapid pressure drops associated with storm systems increase wind speeds. The stronger the pressure gradient between high pressure and low pressure zones, the stronger the wind tends to blow. Over large lakes, that process accelerates quickly because the water surface offers little resistance. Forecast models capture general patterns, yet localized intensification still occurs. Lake geometry influences wave development too. Narrow sections can funnel wind, increasing velocity much like air, speeding up through a constricted passage. Peninsulas, bays, and shoreline contours redirect wave energy. Certain areas historically develop higher waves under specific wind directions. Mariners learn those patterns through experience as well as chart information. Water depth affects wave behaviour near shorelines or submerged features. As waves approach shallower areas, their lower portion interacts with the lake bed. Energy compresses upward, increasing wave height and steepness. This process, known as shoaling, sometimes surprises vessels approaching harbour entrances during storms. Even with accurate charts, timing matters because wave amplification varies with wind strength and direction. Seeches represent another distinctive inland phenomenon. When sustained winds push water toward one end of a lake, water levels rise there temporarily. Once wind relaxes, gravity pulls the accumulated water back, creating a basin-wide oscillation. These oscillations resemble standing waves and can persist for hours. Harbour water levels fluctuate, currents shift, and ships moored or manoeuvring in ports must adapt. Temperature differences between water layers contribute indirectly. Warmer surface water overlays colder, deeper water during much of the year. Strong winds mix these layers, altering density distribution. Mixed layers sometimes respond differently to wind energy than stratified layers, subtly influencing wave formation characteristics. Ship design considerations reflect these conditions. Great Lakes freighters, often called lakers, feature long hulls optimized for lock transit, but reinforced to handle steep wave encounters. Structural engineers calculate stress loads associated with repeated wave impacts. Reinforcement does not eliminate motion but ensures vessels tolerate expected conditions safely. Cargo securing systems also account for wave-induced motion. Bulk cargo such as iron ore, coal or grain must remain evenly distributed. Shifting cargo alters center of gravity, affecting stability. Engineers design holds and loading procedures carefully, yet extreme motion occasionally challenges those safeguards. Operational decisions often revolve around wave forecasts. Captains evaluate predicted wind speeds, fetch alignment, and expected wave heights before departure. Adjusting departure time, altering route, or reducing speed can mitigate exposure. These decisions involve balancing safety, scheduling commitments, and economic considerations. Visibility conditions frequently accompany large wave events. Storm systems producing strong winds often bring precipitation, fog or blowing snow. Reduced visibility complicates navigation precisely when wave conditions already demand full attention. Radar assists but cannot replace visual confirmation entirely. Nighttime amplifies perception challenges. Without daylight reference, judging wave height and direction becomes harder. Electronic instrumentation compensates partially, yet human interpretation remains essential. Fatigue management becomes especially important during prolonged heavy weather crossings. Ice introduces seasonal complexity. During colder months, wave action interacts with floating ice sheets. Ice pieces collide with hulls, restrict maneuverability, and sometimes alter wave patterns by absorbing or redirecting energy. Ice accumulation on deck increases weight aloft, influencing stability. Communication among vessels helps share real-time observations. Ships crossing similar routes exchange reports about wave height, wind conditions and visibility. These informal updates supplement official weather bulletins and buoy data. Technological tools continue improving. Satellite-based wave models, automated weather buoys, and onboard motion sensors provide increasingly detailed data. Yet even advanced models carry uncertainty because small atmospheric variations produce large surface differences over water. Historical shipwreck investigations often cite wave conditions as contributing factors. Rarely do waves alone cause losses. Instead, waves interact with mechanical issues, navigation challenges, cargo shifts, or human decision timing. Understanding wave dynamics helps explain how such chains develop. Training programs include simulator sessions replicating steep wave encounters. Crews practice steering responses, speed adjustments, and emergency procedures under simulated heavy seas. Familiarity reduces hesitation during real events. Recreational boaters sometimes underestimate wave development on large lakes. Smaller vessels respond more dramatically to steep waves. Public safety campaigns emphasize checking marine forecasts and respecting rapidly changing conditions. Harbour infrastructure reflects wave risk awareness. Breakwaters, channel markers, and dredging projects aim to maintain navigable conditions. Engineering designs consider typical and extreme wave scenarios documented historically. Insurance and regulatory frameworks incorporate wave risk modelling. Vessel inspections verify structural integrity, cargo securing systems, and emergency equipment readiness before shipping seasons begin. Environmental research continues examining how climate variability affects wind patterns and wave characteristics. Some studies suggest changes in storm intensity or seasonal timing, though conclusions remain under evaluation. Operational crews focus primarily on immediate forecasts regardless of long-term trends. Psychological adaptation occurs among experienced sailors. Repeated exposure to wave motion builds familiarity without diminishing respect. Crews learn to distinguish routine motion from conditions warranting precaution. Sound propagation changes with wave activity too. Heavy seas produce continuous background noise affecting acoustic communication. Foghorns, radios, and onboard communication protocols adapt accordingly. Fuel consumption increases during heavy wave navigation. Maintaining course against strong winds and waves requires additional engine power. Voyage planning accounts for these variations. Emergency preparedness integrates wave considerations. Lifeboat launching procedures differ in calm versus rough water. Crew drills simulate both scenarios to ensure readiness. Public perception often imagines ocean waves as inherently more dangerous than lake waves, yet physics does not support that assumption. Wave energy depends on wind speed, fetch, and duration, not salinity. Inland seas meeting those criteria generate comparable conditions. Maritime culture around the Great Lakes reflects accumulated respect for wave behaviour. Stories, training materials, and operational guidelines emphasize vigilance rather than dramatization. Experience teaches that water surface conditions can shift faster than casual observation suggests, and once wave motion combines with reduced visibility, another layer of operational complexity appears. Fog, darkness, precipitation, and horizon loss challenge navigation systems and human perception simultaneously, which leads naturally into examining how limited visibility contributes to maritime risk in these waters without requiring extraordinary circumstances. There is a particular kind of quiet that settles over open water when visibility begins to fade. At first, it can feel almost peaceful. The horizon softens, details blur, light diffuses. Yet for anyone navigating a large vessel, that softening does not bring comfort. It introduces a set of practical challenges that demand constant attention. Fog, darkness, and low visibility conditions on the Great Lakes have played roles in many maritime incidents, not usually by themselves, but as part of a chain of factors that complicate navigation and decision-making. Fog forms on these lakes more often than many people expect. The underlying reason involves temperature contrasts. When warm, moist air moves over colder water, the air cools rapidly. Moisture condenses into tiny suspended droplets. Those droplets scatter light, reducing visibility sometimes to only a few meters. Because the Great Lakes retain cold water below the surface even in summer, fog can appear during seasons when surrounding land feels warm and clear. Spring often brings frequent fog events. Air temperatures rise faster than water temperatures after winter. Warm air crossing cold water creates ideal condensation conditions. Autumn produces similar effects when cooling air interacts with relatively warmer lake surfaces. These seasonal transitions coincide with active shipping periods, increasing operational exposure. Fog rarely arrives with dramatic warning. It often thickens gradually. Crews monitor humidity, dew point spread, water temperature, and wind direction, because those indicators hint at fog development. Still, exact timing varies. A clear route can become obscured in minutes, requiring immediate adjustment. Navigation during fog relies heavily on electronic aids. Radar becomes essential for detecting other vessels, shoreline contours, navigation buoys, and potential hazards. Automatic identification systems transmit vessel position data between ships and shore stations. GPS provides location accuracy. Yet all of these tools depend on proper interpretation. Radar echoes can produce clutter. Small objects sometimes appear faintly. Heavy precipitation complicates returns further. Sound also becomes a navigation tool. Ships use foghorns to signal presence when visibility drops. International maritime rules specify horn patterns indicating vessel type, direction, and operational status. Listening carefully helps crews estimate nearby traffic even before radar confirms positions. Darkness introduces additional variables. Night navigation is routine for commercial shipping, but combined with fog or storms, it intensifies cognitive workload. Visual references disappear. Shorelights may distort through fog. Reflections on water surfaces create illusions affecting distance perception. Human vision adapts slowly to darkness. Bright instrument panels or sudden deck lighting can temporarily reduce night vision. Bridge procedures include controlled lighting levels to maintain visibility while preserving instrument readability. Even with these precautions, fatigue and eye strain accumulate over long watches. Disorientation sometimes arises when visual cues vanish entirely. Without a visible horizon, the brain loses reference points. Vestibular sensations inside the inner ear respond to ship motion, occasionally creating misleading impressions about direction or tilt. Pilots and mariners train to trust instruments over bodily sensation precisely because human perception becomes unreliable under those conditions. Fatigue compounds the problem. Long shifts in low visibility conditions demand sustained concentration. Micro-errors become more likely. Crew coordination, clear communication, and regular watch rotation help manage cognitive load. Maritime regulations specify rest periods partly for this reason. Weather systems frequently combine reduced visibility with other stressors. Heavy rain, blowing snow or wave spray can accompany fog or darkness. Each element adds complexity. Equipment surfaces accumulate moisture or ice. Deck operations slow. Decision-making windows narrow. Technological redundancy exists for a reason. Multiple radar units, backup navigation systems, independent communication channels, and emergency lighting all support continued operation if one system fails. Regular maintenance ensures reliability, because equipment failure during low visibility increases risk significantly. Historical accident investigations sometimes highlight misinterpreted radar information or delayed response to changing visibility. Rarely does one mistake cause an incident. Instead, incremental uncertainties accumulate until corrective action becomes difficult. Traffic density matters too. Certain shipping lanes on the Great Lakes remain busy, especially near ports, locks, and narrow passages. Multiple vessels navigating in fog require strict adherence to communication protocols. Radio channels remain active. Position reports, speed adjustments, and course changes must be communicated clearly. Harbour approaches become particularly delicate under low visibility. Breakwaters, channel markers, and dredged routes require precise alignment. Pilot services often assist larger vessels entering ports. Pilots possess local knowledge of currents, shoals, and traffic patterns that complements onboard navigation systems. Shoreline lighting sometimes complicates perception rather than helping. Industrial facilities, urban areas, and navigation lights produce visual clutter. Fog diffuses those lights, making distance estimation challenging. Mariners rely on charted light characteristics and electronic aids to interpret what they see. Winter darkness introduces another dimension. Short daylight hours mean extended nighttime navigation during colder months. Combined with potential ice, snow, and fog, crews manage layered environmental challenges simultaneously. Psychological responses vary among individuals. Some people experience increased anxiety when visibility drops. Training and experience help normalize those conditions, but vigilance remains essential. Overconfidence can be as risky as excessive caution. Emergency response becomes more complex during low visibility. Search and rescue operations depend on accurate location reporting. Helicopter crews, rescue boats, and nearby vessels coordinate carefully. Thermal imaging equipment assists, but environmental factors still affect detection. Recreational boating incidents often increase during fog events. Smaller craft sometimes lack advanced radar or communication equipment. Public safety campaigns encourage checking marine forecasts and carrying proper signalling devices. Modern meteorological tools provide increasingly detailed fog forecasts. Satellite observations, buoy measurements, and atmospheric modelling improve prediction accuracy. Yet local variability still produces unexpected patches. Acoustic distortion occurs in foggy conditions. Sound travels differently depending on temperature gradients and humidity. Foghorn signals sometimes carry farther than expected or fade unpredictably. Mariners interpret these variations cautiously. Communication clarity becomes critical. Radio transmissions must remain concise and unambiguous. Background noise from wind, engines, or precipitation interferes occasionally. Standard phraseology reduces misunderstanding. Insurance assessments and regulatory oversight consider visibility risk factors when evaluating vessel operations. Compliance with navigation rules, equipment maintenance, and crew training standards receives continuous monitoring. Cultural memory around the Great Lakes includes numerous stories of ships navigating blind through fog banks. Those accounts serve educational purposes within maritime communities, reinforcing respect for environmental unpredictability. Technological innovation continues. Enhanced radar processing, augmented reality bridge displays, improved night vision devices, and automated collision avoidance systems support crews. These tools assist but do not replace human judgment. Environmental research examines how climate variability may influence fog frequency. Changes in temperature gradients, ice cover duration, and atmospheric circulation patterns could alter visibility trends. Operational planning adapts as data evolves. Professional mariners generally accept low visibility as a routine challenge rather than an exceptional one. Preparation, training, and procedural discipline make continued operation possible even when visual references disappear. And once navigation becomes more complex due to reduced visibility, attention naturally shifts toward what lies beneath the surface as well. Submerged hazards, shoals, reefs, and underwater terrain play quiet roles in maritime safety, often unnoticed until environmental conditions combine to make them operationally significant. When people picture maritime danger, they often imagine towering waves, violent storms, or dramatic collisions. Those situations certainly exist, yet many incidents begin far more quietly. Beneath the surface of the Great Lakes sits an uneven landscape shaped by glaciers, shifting sediment, ancient river channels, and exposed bedrock. Shoals, reefs, submerged ridges, sandbars, and scattered debris create a complicated underwater environment that demands constant awareness from anyone navigating these waters. Because most of it remains invisible from above, the risks tend to feel abstract until conditions align in ways that bring them into play. The geological story starts thousands of years ago during the last ice age. Massive glaciers advanced and retreated repeatedly across the region. Their movement carved deep basins that eventually filled with meltwater, forming the modern lakes. But glaciers did not leave smooth floors behind. They scraped rock unevenly, deposited sediment irregularly, and left ridges, shallow shelves, and abrupt drop-offs. Some of those formations sit just below the waterline today, especially near shorelines, island chains, and historical river outlets. Shoals represent one of the most common underwater hazards. Essentially, they are areas where water becomes shallower than surrounding regions. Sometimes shoals consist of sand accumulation shaped by currents. Other times they involve exposed rock formations barely submerged. Depth charts mark these areas carefully, but water levels fluctuate seasonally due to precipitation patterns, evaporation, seeches, and long-term climatic cycles. A shoal that appeared comfortably submerged decades ago may lie closer to the surface today. Reefs in the Great Lakes differ somewhat from tropical coral reefs, yet the navigational concern is similar. Many consist of rock outcroppings extending from the lakebed upward. Some are remnants of ancient geological structures. Others formed through erosion processes. They may not break the surface visibly, particularly in rough water or low visibility conditions. Radar does not detect them, and visual identification often depends on clear water and daylight. Sediment movement adds another layer. Rivers continuously carry sand, silt, and organic material into the lakes. Wind-driven currents redistribute that sediment, gradually reshaping underwater contours. Harbours and navigation channels require regular dredging precisely because natural deposition would otherwise reduce safe depth over time. Even with dredging, shifting sandbars occasionally develop between maintenance cycles. Chart accuracy remains high overall, but navigation charts represent best-known information rather than unchanging reality. Hydrographic surveys update data periodically using sonar mapping and depth sounding. Still, vast areas exist where subtle changes occur between surveys. Professional mariners treat charted depths conservatively, maintaining safety margins especially during heavy weather or when carrying deep draft cargo. Low water levels create particular concern. Multi-year periods of reduced precipitation or increased evaporation lower lake levels gradually. Shipping companies adjust loading limits accordingly, because deeper drafts increase grounding risk. Conversely, high water levels reduce clearance under bridges and along harbour structures. Both extremes require operational adaptation. Islands scattered throughout the Great Lakes contribute to navigational complexity. Archipelagos such as those in northern Lake Huron or Lake Superior present intricate routes. Channels between islands may appear wide on charts but contain submerged ridges or boulder fields. Pilots with local expertise often guide larger vessels through these areas. Human-made underwater hazards exist as well. Historical shipwrecks themselves sometimes become obstacles. While many lie in deep water, others rest in shallower zones. Fishing nets, lost anchors, construction debris, and submerged infrastructure occasionally complicate navigation. Authorities issue notices to mariners when new hazards are identified, but awareness relies on regular chart updates and communication. Visibility underwater affects hazard detection too. Freshwater clarity varies widely depending on location, weather, biological activity, and sediment suspension. Storms stir bottom material, reducing visibility even if surface conditions improve. Sonar helps detect depth changes, yet interpreting sonar data requires training and experience. Soundings remain fundamental. Ships continuously monitor water depth beneath the keel using echo sounders. Alarms trigger when depth decreases below preset thresholds. However, reaction time depends on vessel speed, turning radius, and proximity to hazards. Large freighters cannot stop or change course instantly. Weather interacts with underwater hazards in subtle ways. Strong winds push water toward one shoreline, temporarily lowering levels elsewhere. This effect can expose shoals more prominently or reduce clearance unexpectedly. Seiche activity produces similar short-term fluctuations. Mariners monitor water level reports alongside weather forecasts. Currents, although generally weaker than ocean currents, still influence navigation near constricted passages, river mouths and harbour entrances. Combined with wind-driven waves, they can alter vessel drift. Correcting for drift requires continuous adjustment. Night navigation increases reliance on electronic aids when underwater hazards exist nearby. Lighthouses, buoys and beacons mark safe channels, but fog, precipitation, or equipment malfunction occasionally obscure them. Redundancy in navigation systems mitigates risk, but never eliminates it entirely. Harbour construction projects sometimes introduce temporary hazards. Dredging equipment, submerged pipelines, or construction materials remain marked but require careful avoidance. Notices to mariners communicate these developments, yet constant situational awareness remains essential. Historical accounts show many groundings occurred not during extreme storms but under moderate conditions combined with slight navigational miscalculations. Fatigue, distraction, outdated charts, or equipment misinterpretation contributed alongside environmental factors. Training programs emphasize chart reading, electronic navigation interpretation, and visual observation skills simultaneously. Over-reliance on any single method increases vulnerability. Cross-checking information improves safety margins. Insurance companies analyze grounding incidents carefully because hull damage from underwater contact can range from minor scraping to severe structural compromise. Preventive training often reduces claim frequency more effectively than technological upgrades alone. Environmental protection considerations also shape responses. Grounding sometimes risk fuel spills or cargo release. Emergency response protocols include containment measures, environmental assessment, and coordination with regulatory agencies. Commercial fishing operations occasionally deploy gear that unintentionally become submerged hazards. Nets, traps, or lines drifting outside expected areas pose entanglement risks. Communication between shipping and fishing communities helps minimize conflicts. Advances in hydrographic surveying technology continue improving underwater mapping accuracy. Multi-beam sonar, satellite-derived bathymetry, and autonomous survey vessels expand data coverage. Yet continuous natural change means mapping remains an ongoing process rather than a one-time solution. Cultural memory around certain hazardous areas persists among mariners. Locations with histories of repeated groundings gain reputations. Those informal reputations supplement official charts, reinforcing caution even when conditions appear favourable. Economic pressures occasionally intersect with hazard awareness. Shipping schedules encourage efficiency, but experienced captains prioritise safe navigation margins regardless of commercial incentives. Professional standards emphasise that cargo arrives safely or not at all. Climate variability influences sediment movement and water level cycles, potentially altering hazard exposure over time. Research institutions monitor these trends, sharing findings with maritime authorities. Emergency preparedness includes grounding response procedures. Crews train to assess hull integrity, control flooding, communicate distress, and coordinate rescue if necessary. Preparation reduces escalation when contact occurs. Public perception rarely focuses on underwater hazards because they remain invisible. Storms capture attention more easily, yet many maritime professionals consider submerged terrain one of the most persistent everyday challenges on the lakes. Psychological factors play subtle roles too. Familiar routes can create complacency. Regular reminders through training, safety briefings, and incident reviews counteract that tendency. Technological redundancy continues expanding. Integrated bridge systems combine chart data, radar overlays, depth sounding, and GPS positioning. These systems enhance situational awareness but still require human interpretation. And when environmental complexity combines with human decision-making, another dimension emerges. Fatigue, judgment calls, communication clarity, and operational pressure all influence how crews respond to evolving conditions, which naturally brings attention to the human element shaping maritime safety alongside environmental factors. When people talk about ships sinking, the conversation often turns quickly towards storms, waves, hidden reefs, or equipment failures. Those factors certainly matter, but maritime investigations repeatedly show another element that quietly influences many incidents. Human decision-making sits at the centre of ship operations. Even with advanced technology, experienced crews, and detailed procedures, ships ultimately depend on people interpreting information, making choices, and reacting under pressure. Fatigue, judgment calls, communication clarity, and timing frequently shape outcomes in ways that are less dramatic than storms but just as important. Fatigue is probably the most persistent challenge. Commercial shipping rarely follows a simple daytime schedule. Cargo must move continuously. Ports operate around the clock. Crews stand watch in rotating shifts, often 4 to 6 hours at a time. Those rotations disrupt natural sleep cycles. Even when regulations require minimum rest periods, environmental conditions, noise, vibration, and operational demands sometimes reduce actual sleep quality. On the Great Lakes, voyages may last anywhere from several hours to multiple days, depending on route length. Locks, harbour approaches, and busy traffic areas demand heightened alertness precisely when crews might already be tired. Long periods of routine monitoring can create mental monotony. followed suddenly by moments requiring rapid, precise decision-making. That transition from calm observation to urgent action challenges concentration. Scientific studies consistently show that sleep deprivation affects reaction time, attention span, and decision accuracy. These effects often develop gradually, so individuals may not realize their performance has declined. Training programs now include fatigue awareness specifically, because experienced professionals sometimes underestimate its impact. Bridge teams typically consist of multiple crew members to distribute workload. Officers rotate watch duties. Lookouts assist with visual observation. Engineers monitor mechanical systems separately. Clear division of responsibility reduces individual burden, yet coordination remains essential. Miscommunication during fatigue increases the chance of small errors accumulating. Judgment calls form another layer. Maritime operations rarely follow a rigid script. Weather forecasts provide guidance, not certainty. Equipment readings require interpretation. Traffic situations evolve continuously. Captains and officers weigh competing priorities. Safety margins, schedule commitments, fuel efficiency, cargo integrity, and crew welfare. For example, deciding whether to continue a voyage as weather deteriorates involves multiple considerations. Turning back early may prevent risk but delay cargo delivery. Continuing might prove safe if conditions stabilize, yet forecasts sometimes change. There is no universal formula, only professional judgment informed by experience, training, and available data. Communication quality influences judgment effectiveness. Clear, concise exchanges between bridge officers, engineers, deck crew, and shore support reduce misunderstanding. Maritime communication standards emphasize specific terminology and structured reporting formats. Even so, stress, fatigue, language differences, or equipment noise occasionally interfere. The concept of crew resource management emerged partly to address these challenges. It encourages open dialogue regardless of rank. Junior crew members are trained to voice concerns if they notice something unusual. Hierarchical respect remains important, but unquestioned authority can suppress useful observations. Many modern shipping companies emphasize collaborative decision-making precisely for that reason. Split-second decisions sometimes arise unexpectedly. A sudden radar contact appears. Steering response changes. An engine alarm activates. Visibility drops. In those moments, crews rely on training and practice procedures. Simulation training helps build familiarity so reactions become more automatic. However, automatic responses carry their own risks. Habitual actions may not suit every situation. Effective training emphasizes both procedural discipline and situational awareness, encouraging crews to adapt thoughtfully rather than react mechanically. Technology has transformed maritime operations, but it also introduces complexity. Integrated bridge systems display radar overlays, GPS positioning, electronic charts, weather data, and engine information simultaneously. These tools enhance awareness, yet they require interpretation. Information overload can occur, particularly during busy conditions. Automation sometimes leads to complacency. When systems operate reliably for long periods, attention may drift. Mariners call this automation bias, the tendency to trust automated outputs even when subtle anomalies appear. Training encourages cross-checking automated data with independent observations. Experience level varies among crew members. Veteran sailors develop intuition about weather patterns, vessel behavior, and operational rhythms. Newer crew members bring fresh training but less accumulated experience. Effective teams balance both, pairing mentorship with updated procedural knowledge. Cultural and language diversity within crews adds another dimension. International shipping often involves multinational teams. Communication standards mitigate misunderstanding, yet accents, phrasing differences, and cultural expectations occasionally affect clarity. Structured communication protocols help maintain consistency. Psychological stress influences decision-making too. Extended time away from family, demanding schedules and responsibility for expensive cargo and crew safety create background pressure. Stress management training has become more common in maritime education. Economic considerations sometimes exert subtle influence. Shipping efficiency matters financially. Delays affect supply chains, contracts, and port schedules. Professional standards prioritize safety, yet operational pressure forms part of the decision environment. Incident investigations frequently reveal chains of small human factors rather than a single dramatic mistake. A slightly delayed course correction, a misunderstood radio call, a missed maintenance detail, combined with environmental stresses, can escalate gradually. Maintenance decisions also involve human judgment. Engineers monitor equipment performance continuously. Scheduling repairs requires balancing operational continuity with safety margins. Deferred maintenance occasionally contributes to mechanical failures if risk assessments prove overly optimistic. Documentation and checklists support consistency. Pre-departure inspections, equipment verification, cargo securing procedures, and safety drills follow standardized formats. Checklists reduce reliance on memory, particularly under fatigue. Training simulators replicate complex scenarios, heavy weather navigation, equipment malfunctions, collision avoidance, emergency evacuation. Repetition builds familiarity, allowing crews to practice decision-making without real-world consequences. Medical readiness forms part of human factor planning. Crew members receive first aid training. Ships carry medical supplies. Remote consultation with shore-based medical professionals is available via communication systems. Physical health influences cognitive performance, so fitness standards exist for maritime personnel. Technology continues evolving to support human decision-making. Alertness monitoring systems, improved ergonomic bridge layouts, and predictive maintenance analytics aim to reduce workload and error likelihood. Adoption varies across fleets, but the trend reflects recognition of human factors. Regulatory bodies incorporate human element considerations into safety standards. Rest hour regulations, certification requirements, and training curricula all address fatigue and decision-making explicitly. Historical maritime culture sometimes emphasized toughness and endurance over rest. Modern safety philosophy shifts toward acknowledging human limitations realistically. Encouraging adequate rest and open communication improves safety outcomes measurably. Recreational boating incidents illustrate similar patterns on a smaller scale. Inexperienced operators underestimate weather, misinterpret navigation aids, or delay decisions. Public education campaigns emphasize preparation and awareness. Research into cognitive performance under maritime conditions continues. Universities and maritime institutes study fatigue cycles, stress responses, and decision-making patterns specific to ship operations. Community memory around the Great Lakes includes accounts where human decisions played significant roles. These stories often serve educational purposes within training programs, rather than public dramatization. Ultimately, ships do not operate independently. Every radar adjustment, engine setting, course correction, and communication exchange involves human interpretation. Technology assists, environment challenges, but people integrate information into action. And when those human decisions intersect with technological systems directly, another area of interest appears. Navigation electronics, propulsion systems, communication networks, and safety equipment enhance capability, but occasionally introduce their own vulnerabilities, which makes examining the limits of technology in maritime operations a natural next step in understanding how incidents continue to occur despite modern advancements. For anyone looking at modern shipping from the outside, it is easy to assume that advanced technology has removed most of the uncertainty from maritime travel. Ships today carry satellite navigation, radar systems, automated engine monitoring, digital charts, weather forecasting data, and constant communication links with shore stations. Compared with earlier centuries, the difference is dramatic. Yet even with all these tools, technology does not eliminate risk. It changes how risk appears. On the Great Lakes in particular, where environmental conditions already demand attention, the limits of navigation technology sometimes become very clear. Satellite navigation systems, especially GPS, form the backbone of modern maritime positioning. They provide highly accurate location data under normal conditions. Ships plot courses electronically, overlay radar information on digital charts, and maintain continuous positional awareness. However, GPS signals depend on satellites orbiting thousands of kilometers above Earth. Signal interruption, interference, or equipment malfunction occasionally affects accuracy. Atmospheric disturbances, solar activity, or technical faults rarely disrupt service entirely, but can introduce small positional errors. Those small errors matter more near shoals, harbour entrances, or narrow channels than they do in open water. A difference of a few meters can determine whether a vessel remains safely in a dredged channel or edges towards shallower ground. Mariners therefore treat GPS as one component of navigation rather than the sole reference. Electronic charts have replaced many paper charts, offering real-time position overlays and dynamic updates. They improve situational awareness, but they also rely on accurate underlying data and proper system calibration. Incorrect chart settings, outdated data, or software glitches sometimes produce misleading displays. Training emphasizes cross-checking electronic charts with radar, visual cues, depth soundings, and traditional navigation methods. Radar provides critical information during low visibility. It detects other vessels, shorelines, navigation buoys, and weather patterns. Still, radar interpretation is not automatic. Sea clutter, precipitation, ice, or surface reflections can obscure smaller targets. Operators adjust sensitivity, gain, and filtering parameters continuously. Misinterpretation occasionally occurs, particularly under fatigue or high workload conditions. Automatic identification systems, often abbreviated AIS, transmit vessel identity, position, speed, and course information electronically. They enhance traffic awareness, especially in busy shipping lanes. However, AIS depends on proper configuration aboard each vessel. Incorrect data entry, antenna issues, or signal blockage can reduce reliability. Mariners treat AIS as supplemental information rather than a replacement for radar observation. Depth sounding equipment plays a central role near shallow areas. Echo sounders measure water depth beneath the keel using acoustic pulses. Alarms activate when depth falls below preset thresholds. Yet acoustic propagation varies with water temperature, salinity, and sediment content. Freshwater conditions on the Great Lakes influence sound transmission differently than ocean environments. Regular calibration ensures accuracy, but anomalies still occur occasionally. Weather forecasting technology has improved enormously, incorporating satellite imagery, buoy data, radar observations, and advanced atmospheric modelling. Forecasts for wind, waves, precipitation, and visibility support voyage planning. Despite this sophistication, microscale variations remain difficult to predict precisely. Localized storms, fog banks, or sudden wind shifts still surprise crews occasionally. Communication technology keeps ships connected continuously. Satellite phones, radio systems, digital messaging, and internet links allow coordination with ports, shipping companies, and rescue services. Yet communication depends on electrical reliability, antenna integrity, and network availability. Severe weather, ice accumulation, or mechanical failure can interrupt connectivity temporarily. Power systems aboard ships incorporate redundancy, but electrical faults still occur. Generators, switchboards, wiring, and control electronics require ongoing maintenance. A power interruption affects navigation displays, lighting, propulsion control, and communication simultaneously. Emergency backup systems exist precisely because of this possibility. Mechanical automation supports engine performance monitoring. Sensors track temperature, vibration, fuel flow, and structural stress. Automated alerts notify engineers when readings deviate from normal ranges. However, sensors themselves can fail or drift out of calibration. Engineers interpret data rather than accepting it unquestioningly. Human interaction with technology introduces another dimension. Complex interfaces sometimes overwhelm operators during busy conditions. Training emphasizes familiarization with specific equipment models because differences exist between manufacturers. Confusion about controls or display interpretation occasionally contributes to operational delays. Software updates present both benefits and challenges. Updated systems improve functionality, correct errors, and enhance security. Implementation requires careful testing because compatibility issues sometimes arise. Maritime operators coordinate updates to minimize operational disruption. Cybersecurity has become an emerging concern. Ships increasingly rely on interconnected digital systems. Unauthorized access or malicious interference, while still relatively rare in this context, represents a recognized risk. Protective measures include network segmentation, authentication protocols, and monitoring. Environmental factors unique to the Great Lakes affect technology performance. Freshwater icing on antennas, sensors, or radar domes reduces effectiveness. Moisture condensation inside electronic housings affects circuitry. Temperature fluctuations influence battery performance and display responsiveness. Harbour infrastructure also depends on technology. Navigation lights, buoy positioning systems, lock control mechanisms, and traffic monitoring networks require maintenance. Equipment malfunction ashore can influence vessel operations temporarily. Training programs incorporate technology. Failure scenarios deliberately. Simulators replicate GPS outages, radar clutter, communication breakdowns, and power interruptions. Crews practice reverting to manual navigation techniques, visual observation, and traditional chart work where necessary. Historical maritime practice relied entirely on such manual methods. Celestial navigation, compass bearings, dead reckoning, and shoreline recognition form the foundation of safe travel. Modern crews still learn these skills as backup competencies, though electronic systems dominate daily operations. Insurance assessments often examine technology redundancy. Classification societies evaluate navigation equipment reliability, maintenance records, and crew training standards. Compliance influences operational certification. Public perception sometimes treats technology as infallible. Professional mariners tend to adopt a more cautious view. They appreciate technological assistance but recognize limitations. That mindset supports continuous cross-verification of information. Economic considerations intersect with technological investment. Advanced equipment requires capital expenditure and maintenance budgets. Shipping companies balance cost efficiency with safety priorities, guided by regulatory requirements and operational experience. Environmental research continues exploring how climate variability influences technological reliability. Increased storm intensity, shifting ice patterns, and temperature fluctuations all affect equipment exposure conditions. Case studies of maritime incidents occasionally highlight technology misinterpretation rather than outright failure. Displays functioned correctly, but situational context led to incorrect conclusions. Training emphasizes critical thinking alongside procedural compliance. Human-machine interface design receives ongoing attention. Ergonomic layouts, clearer displays, and simplified control schemes aim to reduce operator workload. Feedback from active mariners informs design improvements. Redundancy remains a central principle. Multiple independent systems reduce single-point failure risk. Ships typically carry backup navigation displays, alternative communication channels, and secondary power sources. Emergency procedures address worst-case scenarios, Loss of propulsion, steering failure, communication blackout, or simultaneous equipment malfunction all have established response protocols. Regular drills ensure familiarity. Recreational vessels on the Great Lakes sometimes lack comparable redundancy. Public safety outreach encourages carrying backup navigation aids, spare batteries, and emergency signaling equipment. Technological progress continues accelerating. Autonomous vessel research, advanced sensor fusion, predictive weather modelling, and artificial intelligence navigation support are under development. These innovations promise further assistance while introducing new operational considerations. Professional culture within maritime communities generally balances respect for technology with respect for environmental unpredictability. Neither dominates entirely. Safe operation depends on integrating both perspectives continuously. And when technology interacts directly with cargo operations, another aspect of maritime risk emerges: ship stability, loading procedures, weight distribution, and structural stress all influence how vessels respond to environmental conditions, making cargo management an essential piece of understanding why incidents still occur even with modern navigation support. If you stand on the shore and watch one of the large freighters crossing the Great Lakes, the scale alone can make them appear almost immune to trouble. They move slowly, steadily, carrying enormous amounts of cargo across what looks, from a distance, like manageable water. Yet beneath that calm appearance lies a constant balancing act. Cargo weight, distribution, and vessel stability shape how ships behave in waves, wind, and changing conditions. Even with modern engineering, this balance requires ongoing attention because water does not treat heavy loads gently, whether the water is salt or fresh. The ships operating regularly on the Great Lakes often specialize in bulk transport. Iron ore, coal, limestone, grain, and similar materials dominate cargo lists. These commodities travel in vast quantities because water transport remains efficient. A single large lake freighter can carry tens of thousands of tons in one voyage. That weight sits inside cargo holds designed specifically to distribute stress evenly along the hull. The design works well under normal conditions, but stability always depends on how weight interacts with the ship's centre of gravity and buoyancy. Buoyancy itself works slightly differently in freshwater than in saltwater. Freshwater has lower density, which means vessels sink marginally deeper compared with the ocean operation. Engineers account for that when calculating safe loading limits. Those calculations consider draft, which is how deep the hull sits below the waterline. Draft affects clearance over shoals, manoeuvrability in channels, and hull stress during wave encounters. Weight distribution matters as much as total weight. Ideally, cargo spreads evenly along the ship's length and width. Uneven distribution creates trim issues, where the bow or stern rides lower than intended. Excessive trim can increase resistance, affect steering response, and place extra stress on structural components. Loading crews follow strict procedures, often guided by computerized stability models that calculate balance continuously as cargo enters the holds. Bulk cargo presents particular challenges because it can shift. Grain, coal, and similar materials behave somewhat like dense fluids when subjected to motion. Waves cause rolling and pitching. If cargo shifts significantly to one side, the centre of gravity moves accordingly. Stability decreases. Severe shifts can produce listing, where the vessel tilts sideways, complicating navigation and potentially leading to capsizing under extreme conditions. To reduce that risk, cargo holds include internal structures designed to limit movement. Loading procedures also emphasize even compaction. Moisture content influences behavior too. Wet grain or coal may clump differently than dry material, altering weight distribution unexpectedly. Weather conditions during loading sometimes affect cargo characteristics before departure. Liquid cargo presents another scenario, though less common on traditional Great Lakes bulk carriers. Liquids slosh freely inside tanks, creating what engineers call free surface effect. This phenomenon reduces stability because moving liquid shifts weight continuously. Tank design includes baffles to reduce sloshing, and loading limits account for partial filling effects. Structural integrity of the hull interacts closely with cargo weight. Long freighters experience bending forces as waves lift the bow and stern differently from the midsection. Engineers describe this as hogging and sagging. Cargo distribution influences how those forces act. Proper loading reduces structural fatigue over repeated voyages. Temperature plays a role here too. Cold weather can stiffen hull materials slightly, altering stress distribution characteristics. Ice accumulation on deck adds weight above the centre of gravity, affecting stability. Crews monitor ice build-up carefully and remove it when safe. Automation assists loading decisions. Modern ships often use computerized stability programs that model cargo placement, expected wave conditions, and ballast water distribution. Ballast water, stored in dedicated tanks, helps fine-tune stability by adjusting weight placement without affecting cargo. Engineers adjust ballast continuously throughout voyages. Ballast management must follow environmental regulations as well. Discharging ballast water in certain areas requires treatment to prevent invasive species transfer. Operational planning therefore integrates environmental compliance alongside stability considerations. Weather forecasting influences loading decisions before departure. Anticipated heavy seas might encourage slightly reduced cargo loads or adjusted ballast settings. Such decisions affect profitability but enhance safety margins. Human factors remain significant. Loading crews, engineers, and captains communicate continuously during cargo operations. Miscommunication about hold levels, ballast status, or cargo properties occasionally introduces discrepancies. Checklists, sensors, and verification procedures reduce that risk. Maintenance of cargo handling equipment matters too. Conveyor systems, cranes, hatch covers, and sealing mechanisms require regular inspection. Hatch integrity becomes critical during heavy weather. Water ingress into cargo holds alters weight distribution rapidly and threatens stability. Historical incidents sometimes involved hatch failures combined with heavy seas. Lessons from those events led to stronger hatch designs, improved sealing systems, and stricter inspection routines across the industry. Harbour loading conditions vary. Some ports operate in confined spaces with wind exposure. Uneven loading sequences occasionally arise due to logistical constraints. Stability calculations adjust continuously during such operations. Insurance and classification societies evaluate cargo management practices carefully. Certification requires documented procedures, trained personnel, and equipment reliability. Compliance supports both safety and commercial credibility. Technological improvements continue. Sensors embedded in cargo monitor weight distribution in real time. Structural health monitoring systems track hull stress during voyages. Data analysis helps predict maintenance needs before failures occur. Public perception rarely connects cargo management with shipwreck risk. Storms capture attention more readily. Yet investigations often show that cargo behaviour influenced how vessels responded to environmental stress. Training emphasises understanding stability principles rather than relying solely on software. Officers learn how centre of gravity, buoyancy, trim, and list interact physically. This foundational knowledge supports better interpretation of automated data. Recreational vessels face similar but smaller scale issues. Overloading, uneven passenger distribution, or improperly secured gear contribute to capsizing incidents. Education campaigns highlight these parallels. Economic pressures sometimes intersect with cargo decisions. Shipping efficiency favours full loads. Safety margins ensure that commercial incentives do not override structural limits. Regulatory oversight enforces those boundaries. Climate variability may influence cargo characteristics indirectly. Changes in precipitation patterns affect grain moisture content. Ice season length influences shipping schedules and loading timing. These factors integrate into operational planning gradually. Community memory around the Great Lakes includes numerous accounts of cargo-related incidents. Maritime museums and training centres preserve these lessons for educational purposes. Professional mariners generally treat stability management as routine rather than exceptional. Continuous monitoring, documentation and adjustment form part of daily operations. And when cargo weight interacts with seasonal ice conditions specifically, another layer of operational complexity appears. Ice stress, hull reinforcement, winter navigation practices, and structural fatigue all influence how ships perform during colder months, which naturally leads into examining how ice and winter shipping conditions shape maritime risk on the lakes without requiring dramatic circumstances. When colder months settle over the Great Lakes, shipping does not simply stop and wait for spring. Commercial demand continues, schedules remain active, and vessels keep moving whenever conditions allow it. That reality introduces a set of practical challenges very different from those seen during warmer seasons. Ice formation, freezing spray, structural contraction, and prolonged exposure to low temperatures all influence how ships operate. None of these factors automatically cause disasters, but they add steady pressure on vessels, equipment, and crews, shaping another part of why incidents sometimes occur in these inland seas. Ice begins forming gradually. Early in the season, thin sheets appear near shorelines where water is shallower and cools faster. As temperatures remain low, that ice spreads outward. Wind breaks it apart, pushes it into ridges, or compacts it against coastlines and harbour entrances. Open water may still exist in large central areas, while edges become increasingly obstructed. Navigating through these transitional zones demands attention, because ice density can change within short distances. Freshwater ice behaves somewhat differently from sea ice. Without salt content, it tends to form smoother surfaces initially, yet once wind and current begin moving it, large rigid plates develop. These plates collide, pile up, and create pressure ridges that extend below the surface as well as above it. Ships encountering such formations experience localized hull stress even when overall ice coverage seems moderate. Hull design reflects awareness of these stresses. Many Great Lakes freighters include reinforced bows and strengthened plating near the waterline. Structural ribs distribute pressure loads more evenly. Classification societies specify ice strengthening standards based on expected operating conditions. Even with reinforcement, continuous contact with heavy ice increases long-term fatigue on metal structures. Temperature affects steel properties subtly. Extremely cold conditions can make some metals less ductile, meaning they absorb impact energy differently. Modern shipbuilding materials account for this, but engineers still monitor structural integrity carefully throughout winter operations. Routine inspections become more frequent during ice seasons. Ice accumulation above the waterline introduces additional concerns. Freezing spray from waves can coat railings, deck equipment, antenna housings, lifeboat structures, and superstructure surfaces. That ice adds weight higher on the vessel, raising the centre of gravity. Increased top weight reduces stability margins, especially when combined with heavy cargo loads. Crews regularly remove accumulated ice when conditions permit. This task sounds straightforward, but often occurs in cold wind, limited visibility, and moving decks. Safety harnesses, specialized tools, and protective clothing become essential. Timing matters because removing ice during severe weather may expose crew members to greater risk than leaving it temporarily. Propulsion systems also interact with ice conditions. Propellers striking floating ice fragments experience vibration and potential blade damage. Ice ingestion into cooling systems affects engine performance. Engineers monitor temperatures, flow rates, and vibration signatures continuously to detect emerging issues early. Navigation speed typically decreases in ice. Reduced speed protects hull integrity and allows better reaction time when encountering thicker formations. Slower travel affects schedules and fuel consumption, introducing logistical considerations alongside safety priorities. icebreakers play a significant role in maintaining shipping routes. Government-operated icebreakers clear channels, escort commercial vessels, and monitor ice movement patterns. Coordination between freighters and icebreaker crews relies on radio communication, satellite tracking, and shared situational awareness. Harbour operations change during winter too. Docks accumulate ice, requiring mechanical clearing before vessels can berth safely. Mooring lines stiffen in cold weather, making handling more difficult. Loading equipment may require de-icing before use. These operational adjustments extend turnaround times. Water levels fluctuate seasonally, and ice influences those patterns. Wind-driven ice accumulation along shorelines temporarily displaces water, altering harbour depth readings. Mariners factor this variability into approach planning. Visibility challenges intensify during winter months. Snow squalls, blowing ice crystals, and shorter daylight hours combine with existing fog risks. Navigation lights reflect off airborne ice particles, sometimes distorting visual cues. Radar interpretation requires experience because ice flows produce echoes similar to land or vessel contacts. Cold temperatures affect electronics as well. Batteries discharge faster. Displays respond more slowly. Moisture condensation forms when equipment moves between temperature zones. Protective housings, heating elements, and maintenance protocols address these concerns. Communication reliability remains critical. Ice accumulation on antennas can degrade signal strength. Crews monitor transmission quality continuously, clearing ice when safe. Backup communication channels remain available for redundancy. Cargo characteristics change in cold weather. Bulk materials such as coal, ore, and grain may freeze together, affecting unloading procedures. Frozen cargo can adhere to hold surfaces, requiring mechanical braking or heated air circulation to release it. These processes extend port stays and demand careful planning. Ballast water management also becomes more complex. Ballast tanks help maintain stability, but freezing conditions influence pumping systems, valve operation, and water viscosity. Heating arrangements and insulation reduce operational difficulty. Structural stress accumulates not only from direct ice contact, but also from temperature cycling. Repeated freezing and thawing cause expansion and contraction in materials. Over time, microfractures may develop. Regular inspections aim to identify such issues before they escalate. Historical records show winter shipping incidents often involve multiple overlapping factors: ice pressure, reduced visibility, mechanical strain, and human fatigue. Rarely does ice alone cause a loss. Instead, it contributes to a chain of operational challenges. Training programs emphasize winter-specific procedures. Crews learn ice navigation techniques, cold weather maintenance routines, and emergency response strategies tailored to freezing conditions. Simulator sessions replicate ice encounters, allowing practice without physical risk. Environmental considerations influence winter operations too. Ice cover affects ecosystems, shoreline erosion patterns, and water temperature distribution. Maritime authorities coordinate with environmental agencies to minimize ecological impact during icebreaking and shipping activity. Economic incentives encourage extending shipping seasons whenever possible. Ice-resistant vessel design and improved forecasting allow later departures in autumn and earlier spring resumptions. Safety assessments balance commercial efficiency with operational limits. Climate variability introduces evolving patterns. Some recent years show reduced ice coverage, while others produce heavy ice seasons. Researchers study long-term trends, but operational decisions rely primarily on current observations and short-term forecasts. Insurance frameworks reflect winter risk levels. Premium adjustments sometimes correspond with seasonal conditions. Compliance with ice strengthening standards and crew training requirements influences coverage terms. Recreational boating largely ceases during peak ice seasons, reducing traffic conflicts. However, fishing operations and research vessels occasionally remain active, requiring coordination with commercial shipping. Cultural memory around the Great Lakes includes numerous winter navigation stories. These accounts often emphasize routine professionalism rather than drama, highlighting steady adaptation to environmental reality. Technological innovation continues improving winter capability. Advanced hull coatings reduce ice adhesion. Propeller materials resist impact damage better. Remote sensing technologies map ice thickness and movement in near real time. Search and rescue operations face added complexity in winter. Helicopter icing risk, limited landing zones, and reduced daylight influence response strategies. Coordination among agencies remains essential. Psychological factors affect crews working extended periods in cold, low-light environments. Maintaining morale, adequate rest, and clear communication helps preserve performance. Shipping companies increasingly recognize mental well-being as part of operational safety. Infrastructure investment supports winter navigation. Icebreaking fleets, harbour maintenance equipment, weather monitoring stations, and communication networks all require continuous funding and upkeep. Professional mariners typically treat winter conditions as a manageable operational phase rather than an exceptional crisis. Preparation, equipment readiness, and procedural discipline make continued shipping possible. And once historical incidents involving severe weather and ice accumulate over decades, certain events stand out for the lessons they provided. Examining how past disasters influenced modern safety practices offers context for why today's operations look the way they do, without needing dramatic framing, simply tracing how experience gradually reshaped maritime standards on these lakes. Over time, shipping on the Great Lakes has accumulated a long record of experience. Some of that experience comes from routine voyages completed safely day after day. Some comes from research, engineering advances, and improved forecasting. And some comes from incidents that force the maritime community to reconsider how ships are built, operated, and supported. Historical disasters rarely remain isolated events. Investigations follow them, recommendations emerge, regulations change, and operational culture adjusts gradually. Looking at those moments helps explain why modern shipping looks the way it does today. In the 19th century, shipping expanded rapidly as industrial development increased demand for raw materials. Iron ore from Minnesota, grain from agricultural regions, timber from northern forests, and coal from industrial centres all moved across the lakes. Wooden schooners, early steamships, and hybrid sailing vessels carried those cargoes. Construction standards varied widely. Forecasting technology barely existed. Communication between ships and shore depended largely on visual signals, written dispatches, or occasional telegraph access in ports. Storm-related losses occurred frequently during that era. Autumn gales sometimes caught vessels far from shelter. Without reliable weather information, captains relied on barometers, cloud observation, and personal experience. Many made cautious decisions, yet sudden weather intensification occasionally exceeded expectations. Shipwreck records from the late 1800s show clusters of losses following major storms, especially on Lake Superior and Lake Michigan. One important lesson from those early losses involved structural strength. Wooden hulls provided flexibility but limited resistance to prolonged wave impact and ice pressure. Gradually, steel construction replaced wood. Steel hulls offered improved durability, larger cargo capacity, and better resistance to environmental stress. Classification societies began developing standardized construction requirements, improving consistency across fleets. Communication technology marked another turning point. The introduction of marine radio in the early 20th century allowed ships to exchange weather information, distress calls, and navigational updates. Before radio adoption, a vessel encountering trouble might have no way to alert nearby ships. Afterward, coordinated responses became possible. Distress signalling procedures standardized internationally, increasing rescue success rates. Navigation aids expanded as well. Lighthouses, buoys, and beacons multiplied across hazardous areas. Government agencies assumed responsibility for maintaining these aids systematically. Accurate charting improved as hydrographic surveys became more sophisticated. Mariners gained better information about shoals, reefs, and channel depths. The 20th century brought additional incidents that prompted safety reviews. Steam propulsion systems, while powerful, introduced mechanical complexity. Boiler failures, engine malfunctions, and fuel handling issues occasionally contributed to losses. Engineering standards evolved accordingly. Redundant systems, improved maintenance protocols, and crew training programs reduced mechanical failure rates. World War periods influenced Great Lakes shipping indirectly. Industrial demand increased sharply, pushing fleets to operate intensively. After those periods, many vessels required modernization. Shipyards incorporated lessons learned about hull strength, compartmentalization, and safety equipment. Life-saving equipment improvements formed another outcome of historical disasters. Early vessels sometimes carried insufficient lifeboats or poorly maintained flotation devices. Regulatory changes mandated adequate lifeboat capacity, regular drills, and equipment inspections. Personal flotation devices became standard for crew operations. Meteorological science advanced steadily through the 20th century. Government weather services established marine forecasting divisions dedicated to the Great Lakes. Data collection from buoys, coastal stations, and aircraft improved prediction accuracy. Mariners began receiving regular bulletins rather than relying solely on observation. Radar introduction during and after World War II transformed navigation. Ships could detect landforms, other vessels, and weather patterns even in darkness or fog. Early radar systems required significant interpretation skill, but training programs developed alongside technology adoption. The mid-20th century also saw expansion of lock and canal infrastructure, particularly the St. Lawrence Seaway. Larger ships began transiting between the Great Lakes and the Atlantic Ocean. Standardized navigation rules aligned more closely with ocean shipping practices. Safety regulations adapted to accommodate larger vessel size and increased traffic density. Hull design improvements followed incident analysis. Engineers studied stress patterns experienced during storms and ice encounters. Structural reinforcements, improved welding techniques, and fatigue monitoring systems became standard features. Classification societies updated inspection regimes accordingly. Environmental awareness grew during the later 20th century as well. Some maritime incidents involved fuel spills or cargo release affecting shorelines and ecosystems. Regulatory frameworks expanded to include environmental protection measures alongside navigational safety. Double-hull fuel tanks, spill containment equipment, and reporting procedures emerged. Crew training standards evolved significantly. Maritime academies expanded curricula to include meteorology, human factors, electronic navigation, and emergency response. Certification processes became more rigorous. Continuing education requirements ensured that experienced mariners remained current with evolving practices. International cooperation strengthened over time. Although the Great Lakes lie primarily within the United States and Canada, cross-border coordination proved essential. Joint safety boards, shared weather data, coordinated search and rescue operations, and harmonized regulations improved overall safety consistency. Emergency response capability improved too. Coast Guard stations expanded equipment, personnel, and communication networks. Helicopter rescue operations became more sophisticated. Coordination with local authorities, medical facilities, and shipping companies increased efficiency. Public reporting transparency increased as investigative procedures matured. Accident reports now analyze technical, environmental, and human factors comprehensively. Recommendations circulate throughout the maritime community, informing future practice. Insurance industry involvement also influenced safety evolution. Insurers analyze risk patterns carefully. Premium structures, inspection requirements, and operational recommendations often align with safety improvements. Economic incentives reinforce regulatory compliance. Technological redundancy gained prominence following incidents where single system failures contributed to losses. Backup navigation displays, multiple communication channels and independent power supplies became common design features. Cultural attitudes within maritime communities shifted gradually. Earlier eras sometimes emphasized individual captain autonomy strongly. Modern practice encourages collaborative decision-making, standardized procedures, and open reporting of near-miss incidents to promote learning without stigma. Data analysis now supports risk assessment. Voyage data recorders capture operational information similar to aircraft flight recorders. Investigators analyze speed, heading, equipment status, and environmental conditions retrospectively when incidents occur. Ice navigation practices benefited from accumulated experience too. Strengthened hull standards, icebreaker coordination, and improved forecasting reduce winter risk compared with earlier decades. Search and rescue technology continues advancing. Satellite distress beacons, automated identification systems, thermal imaging, and improved communication networks all contribute to faster response times. Public education initiatives emerge partly from historical recreational boating incidents. Campaigns encourage life jacket use, weather awareness, and proper equipment carriage among non-commercial boaters. Academic research institutions collaborate with maritime authorities to study hydrodynamics, climate variability, structural engineering, and human factors. Findings translate into updated operational guidelines. Museum collections and maritime heritage organisations preserve artefacts and records from past disasters. These serve educational purposes, reminding both professionals and the public that safety practices evolve through experience. Modern vessels incorporate integrated bridge systems combining radar, electronic charts, engine monitoring, and communication interfaces. While technology improves awareness, training emphasizes understanding underlying principles to avoid over-reliance. Regulatory enforcement mechanisms strengthened as well. Inspection schedules, certification audits, and compliance reporting maintain operational standards consistently. Emergency drills aboard ships now include realistic scenario simulation. Flooding, fire, abandonment, communication failure, medical emergencies. Regular practice ensures readiness. Climate considerations increasingly enter safety discussions. Changing storm patterns, water levels, and ice coverage require ongoing monitoring and adaptation of operational guidelines. Professional mariners generally view historical disasters not as distant tragedies, but as practical lessons embedded in daily routines. Procedures followed today often trace directly back to past incidents. And among those historical events, certain individual ship losses have drawn particular attention because of their scale, timing, and investigative impact. Examining one of the most widely discussed cases helps illustrate how a single incident can reshape understanding across the maritime community while fitting into the broader pattern of environmental, technical, and human factors already discussed. Among the many ship losses recorded on the Great Lakes, one event continues to stand out because it combined modern ship design, experienced crew, severe weather, and a sudden outcome that investigators spent years analysing. The sinking of the SS Edmund Fitzgerald in November 1975 did not happen during the early wooden ship era or in a time without radar and radio. It involved a large steel-hulled bulk freighter operating with contemporary navigation technology, routine cargo, and a professional crew. That combination drew attention not only from maritime professionals, but from the broader public, because it showed clearly that even modern vessels remain vulnerable when environmental conditions intensify. The Edmund Fitzgerald was built in 1958 specifically for Great Lakes service. At the time of launch, it was one of the largest ships operating on those waters, measuring about 222 meters in length. It carried massive loads of iron ore pellets from mines near Duluth, Minnesota, towards steel-producing regions farther east. The ship represented efficient industrial logistics. Large cargo capacity meant fewer trips, reduced transport cost per ton, and strong economic value. Structurally, it reflected the engineering standards of the period. Steel construction, reinforced cargo holds, diesel propulsion, radar navigation, radio communication, and modern deck equipment formed part of its operational profile. Nothing about the vessel suggested fragility. In routine conditions, ships of that class operated safely for decades. The final voyage began in early November, a time known among Great Lakes mariners for increasingly unstable weather. Autumn storms tend to intensify as cold, continental air masses meet relatively warmer lake water. Wind speeds increase, wave heights grow, and visibility sometimes deteriorates rapidly. Crews working the lakes expect such seasonal changes and prepare accordingly. On November 9th, 1975, the Edmund Fitzgerald departed Superior, Wisconsin, loaded with iron ore pellets bound for a steel mill near Detroit. Another freighter, the SS Arthur M. Anderson, followed a similar route, and the two ships maintained radio contact throughout much of the journey. Early weather forecasts predicted worsening conditions, but nothing considered extraordinary for that time of year. As the ships progressed across Lake Superior, forecasts evolved. A low-pressure system intensified faster than expected. Wind speeds rose steadily. Reports indicated gusts exceeding 50 knots, later climbing higher. Wave heights built correspondingly. Mariners on nearby vessels described steep seas, reduced visibility, and heavy spray. Conditions matched what seasoned sailors recognized as a severe November gale. Radio communication between the Fitzgerald and the Anderson documented growing concern. The Fitzgerald reported deck damage, possible radar issues, and difficulty maintaining speed. These reports suggested environmental stress affecting equipment reliability, something already familiar in heavy weather operations. Still, communication remained calm rather than alarmed. The two ships adjusted course several times to seek relative shelter from prevailing winds. Navigational decisions during storms often involve balancing exposure reduction with route efficiency. Altering course slightly can reduce wave impact angles, easing structural stress, and improving stability. During the late afternoon and early evening of November 10th, conditions worsened further. Snow squalls reduced visibility significantly. Wind direction shifts created irregular wave patterns. Radar interpretation became more challenging. The Anderson, trailing behind, maintained communication intermittently. Shortly after 7 p.m., the Fitzgerald transmitted a brief message indicating it was holding its own. No distress signal followed. Minutes later, radio contact ceased. Attempts by the Anderson to re-establish communication failed. Radar contact disappeared. Given proximity, the Anderson turned back cautiously, despite heavy weather, to search the area. No survivors were found. All 29 crew members aboard the Edmund Fitzgerald were lost. Subsequent search efforts located the wreck on the lake bed at a depth of about 160 meters. The vessel had broken into two major sections. The suddenness of the loss, combined with lack of a distress call, prompted extensive investigation. Investigators considered several possible contributing factors. One involved wave height. Reports suggested waves exceeding 7 meters, with occasional larger peaks. Steep, closely spaced waves, typical of the Great Lakes, can produce intense bending forces along long hulls. Structural fatigue combined with heavy cargo weight became a focus. Another possibility involved cargo hold flooding. Hatch covers protect cargo compartments from water ingress. If hatch integrity fails under heavy seas, water entering cargo holds adds weight quickly, reducing buoyancy and stability. Earlier incidents on the lakes had demonstrated this mechanism. Radar equipment reliability also entered discussion. The Fitzgerald reported radar difficulty during the storm. Loss of reliable navigation information complicates course adjustments, especially in low visibility conditions. However, radar failure alone rarely causes sinking. It typically interacts with other factors. Shoaling hazards were examined as well. Some speculation suggested the vessel might have struck an underwater ridge, weakening structural integrity before the final sinking. Survey data and wreck analysis produced mixed conclusions, leaving some uncertainty. Structural fatigue remained a strong candidate explanation. Large freighters experience repeated stress cycles over years of operation. Even well-designed hulls accumulate microscopic fatigue damage. Severe wave encounters sometimes expose those weaknesses. Engineering analysis indicated the Fitzgerald had experienced significant stress during prior voyages, though inspection records showed compliance with standards. Weather forecasting limitations at the time also received attention. Forecasts had predicted storms, but not necessarily the full intensity encountered. Advances in meteorological modelling since then have improved predictive accuracy, partly motivated by incidents like this. Safety recommendations followed the investigation. Hatch cover inspection standards strengthened. Weather forecasting dissemination improved. Emergency position indicating radio beacons, now common, gained wider adoption. Structural inspection regimes expanded, particularly for older vessels. Communication protocols evolved too. Continuous position reporting during severe weather became more standard practice. Redundant navigation systems gained emphasis. Training programs incorporated lessons from the incident to reinforce conservative decision-making during rapidly deteriorating conditions. The cultural impact extended beyond maritime professionals. The sinking became widely known through media coverage, investigative reporting, and educational outreach. It reinforced public awareness that the Great Lakes behave like inland seas rather than recreational lakes. Memorials exist in several communities connected to the crew. These serve both commemorative and educational roles, emphasizing respect for maritime work rather than dramatic storytelling. Families, shipping companies, and local organizations maintain those traditions. Technological improvements since 1975 reflect accumulated learning. Electronic chart systems, satellite weather updates, hull stress monitoring sensors, improved survival equipment, and more reliable communication networks all trace part of their adoption momentum to earlier incidents, including this one. Ice navigation standards, cargo securing procedures, and fatigue management training also evolved gradually through this broader historical context. No single incident changes everything instantly, but each contributes to cumulative refinement. The concept of risk layering became more widely discussed afterward. Rather than attributing accidents to one cause, investigators emphasize how environmental, technical, and human factors interact. That approach now guides most maritime safety analysis. Insurance industry practices adapted as well. Risk assessments began incorporating detailed weather exposure modelling, vessel age considerations, and operational decision patterns. Financial incentives aligned more closely with safety compliance. Academic research institutions used the event as a case study. Structural engineering analysis, hydrodynamic modelling, meteorological forecasting improvements, and human factors research all drew data from the incident. Regulatory agencies in both the United States and Canada strengthened cross-border coordination. Shared waters require harmonized safety standards, search and rescue protocols, and information exchange systems. Maritime education incorporated these lessons directly. Training simulators began including severe November gale scenarios modelled after recorded data. Cadets study incident reports not as historical curiosities, but as practical learning tools. Public safety messaging around the Great Lakes increasingly emphasized unpredictability. Recreational boaters received clearer guidance about cold water risk, weather monitoring, and emergency preparedness. Environmental monitoring expanded too. Wave buoys, weather stations, and satellite observation networks grew denser. More data improves forecast reliability and operational awareness. The wreck itself remains preserved in cold freshwater conditions. Limited biological activity slows corrosion compared with saltwater environments. This preservation has allowed continued research while also prompting respectful protection measures. Maritime culture on the lakes generally treats the event with professional respect. It represents a reminder of environmental reality rather than an isolated anomaly. Crews continue operating safely most of the time precisely because they integrate such lessons. And when looking beyond a single well-known loss, the broader pattern becomes clearer. Many wrecks across different eras remain preserved unusually well in cold freshwater, creating an underwater historical record that offers both scientific insight and navigational awareness, which naturally leads into examining how preservation conditions in these lakes influence what remains visible long after ships have settled on the lake bed. And once a ship settles on the lake bed, the story does not end as quickly as many people assume. In oceans, wrecks often degrade rapidly. Saltwater accelerates corrosion. Marine organisms bore into wood, attach to metal, and gradually break structures apart. Strong currents shift sediment constantly. Within decades, sometimes even sooner, recognizable features begin disappearing. The Great Lakes, however, present a very different environment. Cold freshwater conditions slow many of those destructive processes, which is why so many wrecks there remain remarkably intact long after sinking. Temperature plays a central role. Much of the deep water in the Great Lakes stays consistently cold throughout the year, often only a few degrees above freezing. Chemical reactions, including corrosion, generally proceed more slowly at lower temperatures. Steel oxidation still occurs, but at a reduced rate compared with warmer marine environments. Paint coatings, protective layers, and structural metal therefore persist longer than they might in coastal saltwater. Freshwater chemistry differs significantly from saltwater as well. Salt acts as an electrolyte, accelerating electrochemical corrosion of metals. Without that high salt concentration, the corrosion process continues but progresses less aggressively. This difference alone explains why steel hulls sometimes retain recognizable shape and detail decades after sinking in the lakes. Biological activity contributes another major distinction. Saltwater environments host organisms such as shipworms and certain crustaceans that actively bore into wood. These organisms are largely absent from the Great Lakes because they require higher salinity. As a result, wooden ships that sank more than a century ago sometimes remain structurally recognizable, including planking, masts, and deck features. Microbial activity still exists in freshwater, but lower temperatures reduce metabolic rates. Organic materials degrade slowly. Fabrics, ropes, cargo residues, and even paper occasionally survive longer than expected under the right conditions. Preservation is not perfect, but compared with ocean wrecks of similar age, Great Lakes wrecks often retain significantly more detail. Water clarity also plays a role. Some parts of the lakes feature relatively low biological productivity, meaning fewer algae and suspended particles. Clearer water reduces abrasive sediment movement against wreck surfaces. That clarity also aids underwater documentation efforts by divers and remotely operated vehicles. Sediment coverage sometimes enhances preservation. When a wreck settles partially into soft lakebed sediment, oxygen exposure decreases. Reduced oxygen availability slows certain chemical reactions involved in corrosion and biological decomposition. This burial effect can protect lower hull sections especially well. Current strength matters too. Many deep areas of the lakes experience relatively modest bottom currents compared with coastal oceans. Less current means less mechanical abrasion from moving sediment. Structures remain undisturbed longer, preserving original orientation and features. Ice cover during winter contributes indirectly. When lakes freeze extensively, surface wave action diminishes. Reduced wave energy means less disturbance reaching deeper wreck sites. Seasonal ice therefore provides periods of relative stability each year. These preservation conditions have produced what maritime historians sometimes describe as underwater time capsules. Shipwrecks from the 19th and early 20th centuries occasionally retain deck equipment, cargo remnants, and hull structures detailed enough to study shipbuilding techniques of the period. Archaeologists treat many of these sites with the same care applied to terrestrial historical sites. Legal protection has followed. Both the United States and Canada designate many wreck sites as protected historical resources. Regulations limit artifact removal, anchoring near sites, and unregulated diving activities. Preservation benefits scientific research as well as cultural heritage. Diving communities maintain strong interest in these wrecks. Cold water diving requires specialized training, thermal protection, and careful planning. Visibility conditions vary, but when favorable, divers report seeing features like intact railings, anchors, cargo hatches, and propulsion components. Remote-operated vehicles have expanded research possibilities. These tethered robotic systems operate at depths beyond safe recreational diving limits. High-definition cameras, sonar mapping, and manipulator arms allow detailed study without disturbing sites physically. Hydrographic surveys occasionally identify previously unknown wrecks. Advances in sonar mapping technology enable systematic scanning of lake beds. Each discovery contributes to historical understanding of shipping patterns, accident causes, and vessel design evolution. Environmental monitoring agencies sometimes use wrecks as reference points for studying corrosion rates, microbial activity, and sediment movement. Long-term observation helps scientists understand freshwater chemical processes more broadly. Preservation, however, does not mean permanence. Corrosion continues slowly. Biological colonization, although limited, still occurs. Human activity occasionally damages wrecks unintentionally through anchoring, fishing gear entanglement, or unauthorized artifact removal. Protective regulations aim to minimize such impacts. Climate variability introduces additional questions. Changes in water temperature, oxygen levels, and biological activity could alter preservation dynamics gradually. Researchers monitor these trends, though long-term effects remain under study. Ship construction materials influence preservation outcomes. Wooden vessels benefit most from absence of marine wood-boring organisms. Steel hulls corrode more slowly than in salt water, but still eventually weaken. Composite materials used in newer vessels present different degradation pathways. Cargo composition sometimes affects preservation locally. Coal cargo can create chemically different microenvironments. Grain cargo decomposes differently, occasionally producing gases influencing sediment chemistry. Ore cargo generally remains stable, but may affect corrosion patterns where it contacts hull structures. Freshwater also limits certain encrusting organisms common in oceans, such as barnacles. Without heavy biological incrustation, structural details remain visible longer. This clarity aids both research and hazard identification. Navigation authorities incorporate known wreck locations into charting updates. Accurate positioning prevents future groundings. Modern electronic charts include detailed wreck symbols, depth clearances, and recommended avoidance distances. Public education campaigns emphasize respecting protected wreck sites. Removing artifacts disrupts historical context and scientific study potential. Responsible diving practices encourage observation without disturbance. Maritime museums around the Great Lakes often display recovered artifacts obtained legally during early research efforts. These exhibits help communicate shipping history and environmental realities to broad audiences. Insurance investigations occasionally reference preserved wreck conditions when reconstructing accident sequences. Structural position, brake patterns, and cargo distribution provide clues about final moments before sinking. Freshwater corrosion studies use Great Lakes wrecks as long-term natural laboratories. Comparing similar vessels sunk at different times offers insight into corrosion progression under consistent environmental conditions. Sound propagation behaves differently around preserved wrecks too. Sonar mapping relies on acoustic reflection from hull surfaces. Intact structures produce clearer signals than fragmented debris fields. Emergency preparedness planning benefits from preserved wreck knowledge. Accurate mapping helps avoid accidental collisions during poor visibility or equipment malfunction. Cultural memory within lakeside communities often incorporates specific wreck stories. These narratives emphasize practical respect for the water rather than dramatic storytelling. Educational programs draw on those histories. Shipping companies monitor preservation data indirectly because corrosion research informs maintenance practices for active vessels. Understanding how materials behave underwater improves hull protection strategies. Technological developments in coatings, cathodic protection systems, and structural monitoring reflect lessons learned partly from long-term freshwater exposure observations. Environmental agencies sometimes study contaminant release from older wrecks carrying hazardous cargo. Most remain stable, but monitoring ensures early detection if conditions change. Recreational fishing occasionally interacts with wreck sites because fish populations gather around submerged structures. Regulations balance ecological interest with preservation goals. Academic collaborations between historians, engineers, chemists, and ecologists continue expanding. Interdisciplinary study enriches understanding of both maritime history and freshwater environmental science. Photographic documentation plays an important role. High-resolution underwater imagery records structural condition over time. Repeat surveys reveal gradual changes, informing preservation strategies. Satellite positioning combined with sonar mapping allows precise wreck cataloguing. Digital databases provide access to researchers, navigators, and regulatory agencies. Public fascination with preserved wrecks sometimes leads to misconceptions about safety. Intact appearance does not mean structurally sound. Diving guidelines emphasize avoiding penetration into unstable interiors. Maritime heritage tourism has grown around certain accessible sites. Guided dives, museum exhibits, and educational programs support local economies while promoting responsible interaction. Freshwater ecosystems adapt around wrecks gradually. Biofilms, small invertebrates, and fish communities establish microhabitats. Ecological effects generally remain localized but scientifically interesting. Engineering students study preserved wrecks to understand historical shipbuilding practices. Structural details visible underwater offer direct evidence sometimes absent from written records. And while preserved wrecks offer valuable historical insight, they also remind mariners that modern vessels continue facing similar environmental realities. Advances in ship design and safety practices reduce risk, but natural forces remain consistent, which makes examining how contemporary ship engineering addresses these conditions a logical continuation in understanding why incidents still occur despite technological progress. When people look at modern ships crossing the Great Lakes, the impression often leans toward confidence. Steel hulls, satellite navigation, reinforced decks, computerized loading systems, weather forecasting, and trained professional crews all suggest that shipping today should be far safer than it once was, and in many ways it is. Accident rates have declined over the decades, vessel design has improved steadily, regulations have become more detailed. Yet despite these advances, ships still face the same natural forces that shaped navigation centuries ago. Water, wind, temperature, gravity, and geological features have not changed simply because technology advanced. The interaction between modern engineering and these persistent natural forces explains a great deal about ongoing maritime risk. Ship design begins with hydrodynamics. Engineers study how hull shapes move through water efficiently while maintaining stability. For Great Lakes vessels, this involves balancing cargo capacity with maneuverability. Lakers, as these ships are often called, tend to have long, relatively narrow hulls. This design maximizes cargo space while allowing transit through lock systems connecting different lakes. However, long hulls experience bending stress when waves lift different sections unevenly. Engineers reinforce structural ribs, weld seams carefully, and select steel grades capable of absorbing repeated stress cycles. Computer modelling has transformed this design process. Modern naval architects simulate wave interaction, cargo distribution, propulsion efficiency, and structural fatigue before construction begins. Finite element analysis allows detailed prediction of stress concentrations. These models improve safety margins but cannot eliminate environmental variability entirely. Real-world conditions sometimes exceed modelled assumptions, particularly during severe storms. Material science contributes significantly. Advances in metallurgy produce steel alloys with improved strength, corrosion resistance, and fatigue tolerance. Protective coatings slow oxidation. Cathodic protection systems reduce electrochemical corrosion. Even so, metal immersed in water for years gradually deteriorates. Maintenance schedules account for inspection, coating renewal, and structural reinforcement where needed. Hull compartmentalization represents another safety feature. Ships divide internal space into watertight sections. If one compartment floods, others remain intact, preserving buoyancy. This principle has existed for over a century but continues evolving with improved sealing systems, sensor monitoring, and automated alerts. Propulsion systems have also advanced. Diesel engines replaced earlier steam propulsion in most commercial vessels. Modern engines provide better fuel efficiency, more reliable operation, and integrated monitoring. Redundant systems ensure propulsion remains available even if one component fails. Still, mechanical systems operate under heavy load continuously, and maintenance remains critical. Stability design incorporates ballast water management. Adjustable ballast tanks allow crews to fine-tune vessel trim and centre of gravity during voyages. Computerized stability programs calculate optimal ballast distribution based on cargo weight, weather forecasts, and water conditions. These tools help maintain safe operating margins, but rely on accurate input data and careful monitoring. Navigation bridge design reflects ergonomic research. Instrument placement, display readability, lighting conditions, and communication layout aim to reduce operator fatigue and error likelihood. Integrated bridge systems combine radar, electronic charts, GPS positioning, engine data, and weather updates into unified displays. These systems enhance awareness but increase reliance on electrical reliability. Structural reinforcement for ice conditions forms part of Great Lakes-specific design. Reinforced bows, thicker plating near the waterline, and strengthened internal framing help vessels handle seasonal ice encounters. Ice navigation capability varies by vessel classification, influencing operational scheduling. Safety equipment standards have evolved alongside ship design. Lifeboats, immersion suits, emergency beacons, fire suppression systems, and flooding control equipment now meet stringent regulatory requirements. Regular drills ensure crews remain proficient in emergency procedures. Despite all these improvements, natural forces retain their influence. Wind energy over large water surfaces still produces steep waves. Cold temperatures still affect materials, equipment, and human endurance. Visibility conditions still change rapidly due to fog, precipitation, or darkness. Underwater terrain still shapes navigation routes. Engineering mitigates these factors but does not remove them. Hydrodynamic interaction between hulls and waves remains particularly important. Wave impact produces cyclical stress. Over years of operation, even small stress cycles accumulate. Engineers call this fatigue loading. Regular inspection programs aim to detect early signs of fatigue before structural compromise develops. Corrosion presents another persistent challenge. Freshwater slows corrosion compared with salt water, but it does not eliminate it. Protective coatings degrade over time. Mechanical abrasion from cargo loading, ice contact, or wave action exposes bare metal. Maintenance schedules include repainting, thickness measurement, and structural repair as needed. Temperature variation influences material behavior. Steel expands slightly when warm and contracts when cold. Repeated cycles produce microstructural changes over long periods. Engineers incorporate thermal expansion considerations into design tolerances. Environmental unpredictability remains a constant variable. Meteorological forecasting improves steadily, yet localized storm intensification still occurs. Mariners combine forecast data with observation and experience, rather than relying solely on prediction models. Human factors interact closely with ship design. Automated systems reduce workload but introduce monitoring responsibilities. Crew training adapts continuously to technological evolution. Decision-making still involves interpretation rather than simple procedural execution. Economic pressures influence design choices as well. Larger cargo capacity improves efficiency. Fuel economy affects operational cost. Balancing commercial viability with safety margins requires careful engineering judgment and regulatory oversight. Regulatory frameworks ensure minimum safety standards. Classification societies inspect vessels regularly. International conventions guide design, equipment, and operational practices. Compliance documentation forms part of routine maritime administration. Research institutions collaborate with industry to study long-term structural performance. Hull monitoring sensors track stress patterns during voyages. Data analysis informs future design improvements. Environmental considerations increasingly shape ship design. Emission reduction technologies, ballast water treatment systems, and fuel efficiency measures respond to ecological concerns alongside safety objectives. Digital twin technology represents a newer development. Virtual models of individual ships replicate structural characteristics and operational data in real time. Engineers analyze these models to predict maintenance needs and optimize performance. Automation research continues exploring partially autonomous vessel operation. Sensor fusion, artificial intelligence navigation support, and predictive maintenance systems show potential. Human oversight remains essential, particularly in complex environments like the Great Lakes. Historical experience informs modern design continuously. Lessons from past incidents influence reinforcement strategies, equipment placement, and operational procedures. Safety evolves incrementally rather than through sudden transformation. Public perception sometimes assumes technology can fully control natural forces. Maritime professionals generally adopt a more measured view. Engineering reduces vulnerability, but environmental variability persists. Training emphasizes respect for that balance. Cadets learn physics principles underlying ship's behavior alongside practical seamanship. Understanding why design features exist supports better operational decisions. Cultural continuity exists within maritime communities. Experienced mariners pass knowledge informally alongside formal training. Stories of challenging voyages reinforce caution without dramatization. Technological redundancy remains a guiding principle. Backup systems for navigation, propulsion, communication, and power supply reduce single-point failure risk. Regular testing ensures readiness. Maintenance culture plays a crucial role. Preventive maintenance schedules, inspection documentation, and repair planning support long-term structural integrity. Deferred maintenance increases vulnerability even with robust design. Climate variability introduces evolving design considerations. Changing ice patterns, storm frequency, and water level fluctuations influence future vessel specifications gradually. Maritime education integrates engineering knowledge with operational awareness. Bridge officers understand structural limitations. Engineers appreciate navigational constraints. Cross-disciplinary understanding improves overall safety. Insurance industry analysis feeds back into design evolution. Loss data informs risk modeling, influencing premium structures and design recommendations. Environmental monitoring stations provide continuous data supporting operational planning. Wave buoys, weather stations, and satellite observations feed forecasting systems. Public policy influences infrastructure supporting shipping, harbour maintenance, lock operation, navigation aid upkeep and icebreaker fleet management. Professional mariners generally accept that design improvements enhance safety but do not remove environmental influence. That perspective shapes cautious operational culture, and once ship design interacts with real-time operations, another dimension appears involving rescue capability, emergency response coordination, and survival support when incidents occur. Understanding how modern rescue systems function helps complete the broader picture of why ships still operate despite environmental challenges while maintaining preparedness for unexpected events. When something goes wrong on the Great Lakes today, the response usually begins long before anyone outside the maritime world hears about it. Modern shipping operates within a layered safety network built over decades of experience. Rescue systems do not rely on a single agency or piece of equipment. Instead, they involve coordinated communication, trained personnel, surveillance technology, specialized vessels, aircraft, and strict operational procedures. The goal is not only to save lives, but also to contain environmental impact, recover cargo when possible, and understand what happens so future operations remain safer. The first element in any rescue situation is communication. Ships continuously transmit positional data through automated identification systems, radio communication, and sometimes satellite-based reporting. If a vessel experiences trouble, distress signals go out quickly. Modern emergency beacons, often called EPIRBS, activate automatically when submerged or manually when crews anticipate abandonment. These beacons transmit location data via satellite networks directly to rescue coordination centres. Coast Guard agencies in both the United States and Canada monitor these signals around the clock. Because the Great Lakes straddle an international boundary, coordination between the two countries remains routine. Joint protocols allow rapid response regardless of which side of the border an incident occurs. Communication lines stay open between shipping companies, port authorities, weather services and rescue coordinators. Response planning begins immediately once a distress signal arrives. Operators assess location, weather conditions, vessel type, cargo, crew size, and any available damage reports. Decisions about deploying helicopters, rescue boats, nearby commercial vessels or specialized response units depend on that information. Time matters, especially in cold water environments where survival windows can narrow quickly. Helicopters often play a central role in rescues. They reach distressed vessels faster than surface ships, particularly in heavy weather or remote lake regions. Modern rescue helicopters carry hoisting equipment, medical supplies, night vision capability, thermal imaging sensors, and trained rescue swimmers. Crews practice complex hoisting operations regularly, including lifting individuals from rolling decks or lifeboats in rough seas. Surface rescue vessels remain essential too. Coast Guard cutters, ice-capable ships and local rescue boats provide sustained support once on scene. They transport survivors, offer medical assistance, and sometimes tow disabled vessels to safety. Icebreaker vessels double as rescue platforms during winter months, combining navigation support with emergency response capability. Nearby commercial ships frequently assist as well. Maritime tradition emphasizes mutual aid. When distress calls go out, vessels in the vicinity often change course to help if conditions allow. They may provide first response before official rescue units arrive. Training programs encourage such cooperation, while ensuring safety remains paramount. Search technology has improved dramatically. Radar, infrared cameras, sonar systems, and satellite tracking help locate vessels, debris, or survivors even under poor visibility. Thermal imaging detects body heat contrasts against cold water backgrounds, increasing detection chances during nighttime or fog. Emergency medical care begins immediately upon rescue. Hypothermia treatment protocols guide rewarming procedures. Oxygen therapy, intravenous fluids, and cardiac monitoring equipment accompany rescue teams. Coordination with hospitals on shore ensures smooth transfer once survivors reach land. Rescue operations extend beyond human survival. Environmental containment becomes important if fuel tanks rupture or cargo releases occur. Response teams deploy containment booms, skimmers, and monitoring equipment. Environmental agencies coordinate with maritime authorities to minimize ecological impact. Recovery operations follow once immediate danger passes. Salvage companies assess whether vessels can be repaired, refloated, or must remain on the lakebed. Salvage work requires specialized engineering, heavy equipment, diving teams, and careful planning. Cold water conditions, depth, and weather influence feasibility. Insurance considerations intersect with salvage decisions. Cost-benefit analysis determines whether recovery is economically viable. Even when full recovery proves impractical, securing hazardous materials or documenting wreck conditions remains important. Investigation begins alongside recovery. Maritime accident investigators collect voyage data recorder information, communication logs, maintenance records, crew testimony, weather reports, and structural analysis. Their goal focuses on understanding contributing factors rather than assigning blame immediately. Public communication forms another aspect. Authorities release information carefully to avoid speculation while providing transparency. Families of crew members receive priority notification before public announcements. Training exercises simulate rescue scenarios regularly. Joint drills between Coast Guard units, shipping companies, local emergency services, and environmental agencies ensure coordination remains effective. These exercises include cold water rescue, helicopter hoisting, oil spill containment, and medical evacuation scenarios. Technology continues advancing. Satellite constellations provide more frequent positional updates. Drones assist with aerial observation during search operations. Autonomous surface vehicles under development may support future search and monitoring tasks. Weather forecasting integration improves operational readiness. Rescue coordinators monitor evolving conditions closely, adjusting deployment plans accordingly. Severe weather sometimes delays rescue arrival, making early distress signaling even more critical. Cold water survival research informs equipment design. Modern immersion suits retain body heat better while allowing greater mobility. Personal locator beacons attach directly to life jackets. Floating life rafts include insulated floors, canopy protection, and emergency supplies. Community involvement supports response infrastructure. Lakeside towns maintain volunteer rescue units, harbour patrols, and communication relays. Local knowledge sometimes proves invaluable during complex operations. Funding remains an ongoing consideration. Maintaining rescue fleets, aircraft, training programs, and communication infrastructure requires continuous investment. Government agencies justify funding partly through demonstrated effectiveness in past incidents. Legal frameworks guide rescue responsibility. International maritime law obligates ships to assist others in distress when safe to do so. National regulations define agency jurisdiction, reporting requirements, and investigation authority. Psychological support for survivors and rescue personnel receives increasing attention. Exposure to maritime emergencies can create lasting stress. Counselling services and peer support programs help address those impacts. Data analysis from past rescues contributes to improvement. Response times, communication effectiveness, equipment performance, and medical outcomes undergo review. Lessons feed back into training and equipment procurement decisions. Public awareness campaigns encourage preparedness among recreational boaters. Wearing life jackets, carrying distress signalling equipment, monitoring weather forecasts, and filing float plans improve survival chances. Ice rescue techniques receive specialized focus during winter. Helicopter icing, reduced landing zones, and floating ice hazards complicate operations. Specialized training ensures readiness. Salvage engineering advances allow recovery from greater depth than previously possible. Remotely operated vehicles assist with inspection and preparation before human divers enter hazardous environments. Environmental monitoring continues after incidents involving potential contamination. Long-term studies assess water quality, sediment impact, and ecological recovery where necessary. Insurance and regulatory reporting requirements ensure consistent documentation. Transparency supports both accountability and continuous improvement. Educational institutions incorporate rescue case studies into maritime curricula. Future officers learn from real-world scenarios rather than theoretical examples alone. Public perception sometimes focuses on dramatic rescues, yet most successful responses involve careful planning rather than last-minute heroics. Routine preparedness proves more valuable than improvisation. Professional mariners generally view rescue infrastructure as an essential safety net, not a substitute for prevention. Avoiding emergencies remains the primary goal, with rescue capability providing backup when prevention fails. And as environmental conditions themselves continue evolving over time, attention increasingly turns toward how broader climate patterns may influence shipping risk on the lakes, shaping future operational planning, vessel design considerations, and long-term safety strategies without changing the fundamental natural forces already discussed. When conversations turn toward the future of shipping on the Great Lakes, climate patterns inevitably come into the discussion. Not because the lakes are suddenly becoming unpredictable in ways never seen before, but because gradual environmental shifts influence water levels, storm frequency, seasonal ice coverage, and operational planning. Shipping has always adapted to changing conditions. What makes the current situation notable is the pace of environmental observation, the scale of available data, and the need to integrate long-term trends into everyday operational decisions without losing focus on immediate safety. Water levels provide one of the clearest indicators. The Great Lakes have always experienced fluctuations driven by precipitation, evaporation, runoff, and seasonal temperature cycles. What researchers now track more closely is whether long-term averages shift over decades. Higher water levels increase draft capacity, allowing ships to carry more cargo safely. Lower levels restrict loading limits and reduce clearance margins over shoals and harbour entrances. Shipping companies adjust cargo planning accordingly, sometimes altering schedules or routing decisions to accommodate depth changes. Evaporation rates play a significant role in those fluctuations. Warmer air temperatures generally increase evaporation from lake surfaces. Reduced winter ice cover also contributes because open water continues evaporating throughout colder months. Historically, extensive ice cover limited winter evaporation. When ice forms later or melts earlier, that natural evaporation barrier weakens. Researchers continue analysing how these factors balance with precipitation changes over time. Ice coverage itself represents another evolving element. Some recent years have seen reduced ice extent compared with historical averages, though variability remains considerable. Reduced ice can extend shipping seasons slightly, allowing earlier spring departures or later autumn operations. However, less ice also means longer exposure to open water storm conditions during colder months. Ice once provided a stabilising effect by dampening wave energy. Without it, winter storms interact more directly with the water surface. Storm intensity receives particular attention. Meteorological studies suggest potential shifts in how storms develop over large freshwater bodies. Warmer surface water can provide additional energy for storm systems, similar to ocean processes but on a smaller scale. That does not guarantee more severe storms every year, but it introduces variability shipping planners monitor carefully. Fog formation patterns may shift as well. Changes in water temperature relative to air temperature influence condensation processes. Mariners already accustomed to fog variability may notice gradual differences in seasonal timing or frequency, though operational procedures remain largely the same. Wind patterns also factor into climate discussions. Slight changes in prevailing wind direction or intensity affect wave development, shoreline erosion, and sediment transport. Long-term monitoring helps engineers and port authorities plan infrastructure maintenance, dredging schedules, and navigation aid placement. Sediment movement connects indirectly with climate variability. Increased storm activity can resuspend bottom sediment more frequently. River runoff patterns influenced by precipitation changes affect sediment input into the lakes. These processes influence harbour maintenance requirements and underwater hazard mapping. Ecological changes intersect with shipping too. Altered water temperatures affect fish populations, algae growth, and invasive species dynamics. While primarily environmental concerns, these factors sometimes influence navigation through changes in water clarity or harbour maintenance needs. Infrastructure planning incorporates climate projections cautiously. Ports consider water level variability when designing docks, loading equipment, and breakwaters. Lock systems connecting the lakes to other waterways require maintenance schedules aligned with changing hydrological patterns. Ship design itself evolves gradually in response. Engineers evaluate whether structural reinforcement, propulsion efficiency, or stability considerations require adjustment based on observed environmental trends. These changes occur incrementally rather than dramatically. Operational planning benefits from expanded data collection. Satellite observation, automated weather buoys, hydrological monitoring stations, and climate research networks provide continuous information streams. Shipping companies integrate these data into route planning software and safety assessments. Regulatory agencies track environmental indicators alongside shipping statistics. Collaborative research between meteorologists, hydrologists, engineers, and maritime professionals supports informed policy development without overreacting to short-term fluctuations. Economic implications accompany environmental variability. Changes in cargo capacity due to water levels affect transport costs. Extended shipping seasons influence scheduling flexibility. Infrastructure adaptation requires investment. Stakeholders balance these considerations continuously. Insurance modelling incorporates climate data as well. Risk assessments consider historical patterns alongside emerging trends. Premium structures sometimes reflect perceived environmental exposure changes. Training programs increasingly include climate literacy components. Mariners learn how long-term environmental patterns may influence operational conditions while maintaining focus on immediate weather awareness. Public discussion occasionally frames climate change in dramatic terms. Maritime professionals tend to approach it pragmatically. They observe conditions, adapt procedures, and maintain operational flexibility. Experience with natural variability fosters a measured perspective. Environmental protection regulations continue evolving. Emission standards, ballast water treatment requirements, and fuel efficiency measures reflect broader ecological priorities alongside safety considerations. Technological innovation supports adaptation. More efficient propulsion systems reduce fuel consumption. Improved hull coatings enhance hydrodynamic performance. Real-time environmental data integration aids decision-making. Community awareness grows gradually. Lakeside populations observe shoreline changes, seasonal weather differences, and ice coverage variability. These observations sometimes align with scientific data, reinforcing interest in long-term environmental monitoring. Academic research institutions maintain extensive Great Lakes climate study programs. Findings contribute to global freshwater research, as well as regional maritime planning. Cross-border cooperation remains essential. The lakes span national boundaries, requiring coordinated environmental monitoring, regulatory alignment, and emergency preparedness planning. Shipping companies typically plan on multiple timescales simultaneously. Immediate voyage safety, seasonal operational adjustments, and long-term infrastructure investment all require different types of information. Public infrastructure investment reflects environmental considerations. Harbour dredging programs, navigation aid maintenance, and icebreaker fleet planning all incorporate climate data analysis. Cultural continuity persists despite environmental change. Maritime traditions, training methods, and professional caution continue shaping operational culture. Environmental uncertainty encourages redundancy in planning. Alternative routing, flexible cargo scheduling, and diversified transport methods reduce vulnerability to unexpected conditions. Technology development continues responding to both safety and environmental goals. Hybrid propulsion research, autonomous navigation support, and predictive maintenance analytics show potential future influence. Scientific uncertainty remains part of climate discussion. Not all projections align perfectly. Operational planning therefore emphasizes adaptability rather than fixed assumptions. Professional mariners generally approach environmental change as another operational variable. Respect for natural forces remains constant regardless of long-term trends, and as environmental conditions influence not only ship design and operations, but also the daily experience of crews working these routes, attention naturally turns toward the human perspective again, specifically how sailors adapt psychologically and professionally to persistent environmental risk while maintaining routine commercial operations across these inland seas. And as environmental conditions, technology, and operational demands continue shaping shipping on the Great Lakes, another element sits quietly in the background all the time. That element is the human experience of working on these waters day after day, season after season, often in conditions that require constant attention. Ships may be engineered systems, but they operate through people. The psychological side of maritime work rarely attracts headlines, yet it influences safety, decision-making, teamwork, and long-term career sustainability in ways that deserve careful attention. Sailors working the Great Lakes usually develop a practical mindset early in their careers. Training emphasizes awareness rather than fear. Weather forecasts, cargo loads, navigation charts, and equipment maintenance become routine considerations. Repetition helps normalize what might initially seem intimidating. The goal is not to ignore risk, but to treat it as part of professional responsibility rather than something extraordinary. Routine plays an important role in maintaining stability. Life aboard a commercial freighter follows structured schedules. Watch rotations, maintenance duties, meal times, safety drills, and cargo operations occur predictably. That structure helps regulate sleep patterns, stress levels, and concentration. Even when environmental conditions change quickly, routine anchors daily life. Fatigue management remains a major psychological factor. Extended periods away from home, irregular sleep cycles, and demanding operational conditions create cumulative stress. Shipping companies increasingly recognize that fatigue affects performance, communication clarity, and decision accuracy. Many fleets now emphasize rest hour compliance, mental health awareness, and supportive leadership practices. Isolation forms another aspect of maritime work. Crews spend days or weeks aboard ships with limited direct contact with family or friends ashore. Modern communication technology has improved connectivity through satellite internet, messaging platforms, and video calls. Even so, time zone differences, bandwidth limits, and operational schedules still shape how often sailors communicate with home. Crew cohesion helps counterbalance isolation. Shared routines, teamwork during demanding conditions, and mutual reliance build professional trust. Informal conversation during meals, maintenance tasks, or watch handovers strengthen social bonds. Experienced crews often describe this camaraderie as one of the more positive aspects of maritime life. Stress response varies among individuals. Some people adapt quickly to unpredictable environments, while others require longer adjustment periods. Maritime training includes psychological resilience components now, focusing on situational awareness, emotional regulation, and effective communication under pressure. Leadership quality significantly influences crew morale. Captains and senior officers set operational tone. Clear communication, consistent expectations, and respectful interaction foster confidence. Conversely, unclear direction or inconsistent decision-making can increase tension, even when environmental conditions remain manageable. Risk perception evolves with experience. New crew members often focus on visible hazards like storms or heavy seas. Veteran sailors learn to monitor subtler indicators: fatigue levels, equipment sounds, weather pattern shifts, cargo behavior, or communication clarity. That broader awareness supports safer operations. Decision-making under uncertainty becomes a learned skill. Weather forecasts sometimes change, equipment readings fluctuate, and operational priorities compete. Experienced crews develop a balance between caution and efficiency. Overconfidence presents risk, but excessive hesitation can also complicate operations. Training simulators increasingly incorporate psychological stress elements alongside technical scenarios. Simulated storms, equipment failures, communication breakdowns, and time pressure allow crews to practice maintaining composure. Repetition builds familiarity with stress responses before real situations arise. Maritime culture traditionally emphasized toughness and endurance. Modern safety philosophy encourages acknowledging human limits realistically. Seeking rest, reporting stress, and supporting colleagues are now framed as professional strengths rather than weaknesses. Mental health awareness has grown gradually in the maritime sector. Access to counselling services, peer support programs, and mental health training resources continues expanding. Shipping companies recognise that psychological well-being directly affects safety outcomes. Monotony presents its own challenge. Long stretches of routine navigation require sustained vigilance despite minimal visible change. Maintaining attention during calm conditions prevents complacency when conditions shift unexpectedly. Environmental unpredictability reinforces caution without necessarily causing anxiety. Experienced sailors often describe a steady awareness rather than heightened fear. Respect for natural forces becomes habitual, integrated into daily observation. Seasonal variation influences psychological rhythm too. Winter voyages with reduced daylight, cold temperatures, and ice conditions create different stress patterns compared with summer operations. Adaptation strategies include structured routines, adequate lighting, and clear communication. Younger crew members entering the profession today often bring familiarity with digital technology, while senior crew members contribute extensive experiential knowledge. Cross-generational cooperation strengthens operational effectiveness. Professional pride plays a role as well. Successfully navigating challenging conditions, maintaining safety records, and contributing to essential supply chains provide a sense of accomplishment. Many sailors value the tangible impact of their work. Public perception sometimes focuses on dramatic shipwreck stories rather than routine safe voyages. Maritime professionals generally emphasize consistency rather than spectacle. Most trips conclude uneventfully precisely because crews apply careful preparation continuously. Emergency preparedness training influences psychological readiness. Knowing procedures, equipment locations, and communication protocols reduces panic likelihood during actual incidents. Confidence grows from familiarity. Physical fitness supports psychological resilience. Demanding conditions occasionally require manual labour, quick movement on deck, or emergency response effort. Maintaining physical health contributes to overall stress tolerance. Nutrition also matters. Balanced meals support energy levels and cognitive function. Ships typically maintain structured meal schedules partly for this reason. Cultural diversity aboard ships enriches social interaction while requiring communication sensitivity. Multinational crews benefit from shared professional language standards that reduce misunderstanding. Technology influences psychological workload. Integrated navigation systems simplify some tasks, but introduce monitoring responsibilities. Balancing automation trust with active oversight requires ongoing training. Noise and vibration form background environmental factors, Engine hum, wave impact, and mechanical sounds become normal, yet prolonged exposure affects sleep quality and concentration. Ship design increasingly considers acoustic insulation. Time perception shifts during voyages. Days blend together under routine schedules. Maintaining clear calendars, watch logs, and communication records helps preserve orientation. Shore leave opportunities vary depending on port schedules and operational demands. Time ashore provides mental reset but may be brief. Some ports restrict access for security or logistical reasons. Family support networks contribute significantly to sailor well-being. Understanding from partners and relatives helps manage extended absences. Shipping companies sometimes provide family communication resources. Career longevity depends partly on psychological adaptation. Some individuals thrive in maritime environments long-term. Others transition ashore after gaining experience. Both paths contribute valuable expertise to the broader maritime sector. Professional development opportunities help maintain engagement. Advanced certifications, specialized training, and leadership roles provide progression pathways. Accident investigations increasingly consider psychological factors alongside technical ones. Fatigue, stress, communication clarity, and decision context all inform safety analysis. Resilience training often includes stress recognition, breathing techniques, peer communication strategies, and workload management practices. These approaches aim to normalize mental health discussion. Economic stability within the shipping industry influences crew morale as well. Predictable employment, fair compensation, and transparent scheduling contribute to psychological security. Environmental responsibility awareness has grown among maritime professionals. Understanding ecological impact fosters professional pride in safe, responsible operation. Community identity develops in regions closely tied to Great Lakes shipping. Maritime heritage festivals, museums, and training institutions reinforce shared culture. Technological connectivity reduces isolation gradually. Real-time messaging, weather updates, news access, and entertainment options support mental well-being aboard modern vessels. However, connectivity also introduces information overload. Managing digital input alongside operational tasks requires discipline. Professional mentorship remains valuable. Experienced sailors passing knowledge informally help newer crew members adjust psychologically. Regulatory bodies now incorporate human factors explicitly into safety frameworks. Fatigue reporting, rest requirements, and communication standards reflect this shift. Environmental unpredictability remains constant regardless of technological advancement. Psychological adaptation therefore remains an ongoing process rather than a one-time adjustment. Research continues examining how maritime professionals cope with risk exposure over long careers. Findings inform training, policy, and equipment design. Professional satisfaction often derives from mastering complex environments. Successfully operating in demanding conditions reinforces confidence. And when considering why crews continue choosing this profession, despite inherent risk, economic, logistical, and cultural motivations come into focus, shaping ongoing shipping activity across the Great Lakes, while reflecting broader societal reliance on maritime transport. If you look at the long history of shipwrecks on the Great Lakes, it might seem reasonable to wonder why shipping continues there at all. Thousands of vessels have gone down over the centuries. Weather remains unpredictable. Cold water, waves, ice, underwater hazards, and human factors all still exist. Yet ships keep moving across these lakes every day. Ore carriers depart on schedule, grain freighters cross steadily, tankers, ferries, research vessels and support ships follow their routes with professional consistency. The answer lies not in ignoring risk, but in understanding why the benefits of shipping remain significant enough to justify careful, ongoing operation. Economics plays a central role. Transporting bulk materials by water remains one of the most efficient methods available. A single large lake freighter can carry cargo equivalent to hundreds of rail cars or thousands of truckloads. fuel consumption per tonne transported is lower than land-based alternatives. That efficiency reduces cost not only for shipping companies, but for industries and consumers relying on those materials. Iron ore offers a clear example. Steel production across North America depends heavily on ore shipments from mining regions near Lake Superior. Moving that ore by rail exclusively would require extensive infrastructure expansion, increased fuel use, and higher transport costs. Water transport provides a practical balance between capacity and efficiency. Grain shipments follow a similar pattern. Agricultural regions surrounding the Great Lakes produce large quantities of wheat, corn, soybeans, and other crops. Shipping those products by water supports export markets and domestic supply chains. Port facilities developed specifically to handle bulk agricultural cargo remain economically important. Energy-related cargo also travels through these waterways. Coal shipments historically supported power generation, while newer energy infrastructure sometimes relies on different bulk materials. Water transport continues providing logistical flexibility. Geography reinforces the economic case. The Great Lakes connect directly to major industrial and agricultural regions. The St. Lawrence Seaway links them to the Atlantic Ocean, enabling international trade. This interconnected system supports manufacturing, construction, food production, and infrastructure development. Infrastructure investment over decades has created a reliable shipping network. Locks, canals, ports, dredged channels, navigation aids, weather monitoring stations, and rescue services all support safe operation. Abandoning the infrastructure would carry significant economic and logistical consequences. Risk management has improved steadily. While incidents still occur, accident rates relative to shipping volume have declined. Technology, training, regulation, and operational culture all contribute. The maritime community views risk as something to manage rather than eliminate entirely. Professional training ensures crews understand environmental conditions thoroughly. Mariners operating on the Great Lakes receive specialized education about weather patterns, ice navigation, cargo stability, communication protocols, and emergency response. Experience accumulates across careers, strengthening operational knowledge. Regulatory oversight supports consistent safety standards. Inspection regimes, certification requirements, maintenance documentation, and operational reporting create accountability. Compliance systems aim to detect potential problems before they escalate. Technological advancement continues supporting safer operation. Integrated navigation systems, real-time weather updates, structural monitoring sensors, improved propulsion efficiency, and advanced communication networks all reduce vulnerability. Insurance frameworks reinforce safety incentives. Companies maintaining strong safety records often benefit from favorable coverage terms. Loss analysis feeds back into operational improvement strategies. Environmental considerations also influence shipping decisions. Water transport generally produces lower carbon emissions per tonne compared with trucking or rail over long distances. This environmental efficiency supports continued maritime use in an era increasingly focused on emission reduction. Community dependence on shipping remains strong in many lakeside regions. Port cities, shipyards, logistics companies, maintenance services, and training institutions all contribute to local economies. Employment opportunities tied to maritime activity support entire communities. Cultural continuity matters as well. Maritime traditions along the Great Lakes extend back generations. Families often include multiple members who have worked in shipping, shipbuilding, or port operations. This continuity fosters professional pride and institutional knowledge. Adaptation to environmental variability forms part of operational culture. Shipping schedules adjust seasonally. Cargo loads vary with water levels. Ice navigation protocols evolve. Flexibility helps maintain continuity despite changing conditions. Public awareness campaigns emphasize safety among recreational boaters, partly because commercial shipping remains active. Coordinated traffic management reduces conflict between large vessels and smaller craft. Search and rescue infrastructure provides reassurance. Knowing that coordinated response capability exists encourages continued operation while reinforcing safety standards. Research institutions continue studying Great Lakes hydrology, meteorology, ecology, and engineering. Scientific findings inform operational guidelines and infrastructure planning. Technological redundancy supports reliability. Backup systems for navigation, propulsion, communication, and power supply reduce single-point failure risk. Digital logistics management improves scheduling efficiency. Real-time cargo tracking, port coordination software, and predictive maintenance analytics enhance operational stability. Climate variability introduces new planning considerations, yet adaptation strategies already exist. Mariners historically adjusted to water level fluctuations, seasonal storms, and ice cycles. Current environmental monitoring extends that tradition. International cooperation between the United States and Canada ensures consistent regulatory frameworks, shared safety protocols, and coordinated emergency response. Educational institutions maintain maritime training programs specifically focused on Great Lakes conditions. Continuous professional development supports evolving operational competence. Economic diversification within shipping companies reduces dependence on single cargo types or routes. Flexibility enhances resilience. Public policy recognizes shipping as critical infrastructure. Government investment supports lock maintenance, harbour dredging, navigation aids, and rescue capability. Engineering innovation continues addressing environmental challenges. Improved hull coatings, fuel efficiency technologies, emission controls, and structural monitoring systems reflect ongoing progress. Psychological adaptation among crews supports consistent performance. Familiarity with environmental conditions reduces anxiety while maintaining respect for risk. Operational transparency has improved. Incident reporting, safety audits, and regulatory oversight encourage accountability and continuous learning. Maritime insurance and finance sectors incorporate risk modelling based on extensive historical data. Financial planning supports sustainable operation. Environmental protection regulations encourage responsible shipping practices. Ballast water treatment, emission standards, and spill prevention protocols protect ecosystems while allowing commerce. Community engagement programs build public understanding of shipping importance. Port tours, educational outreach, and museum exhibits help contextualize maritime activity. Technological connectivity reduces isolation for crews, improving morale and retention. Labour agreements often include provisions addressing safety, rest periods, and working conditions, supporting long-term workforce stability. Innovation in propulsion, including alternative fuels and hybrid systems, may further enhance efficiency and environmental compatibility in coming years. Infrastructure modernisation projects continue upgrading locks, docks, and navigation systems to meet contemporary standards. Professional mariners generally accept that risk cannot be eliminated but can be managed effectively. That pragmatic outlook supports continued operation. Economic interdependence ensures shipping remains integral to regional supply chains. Industries depend on reliable transport. Historical perspective reinforces confidence. Despite numerous wrecks over centuries, the vast majority of voyages conclude safely. Public interest in maritime history sometimes focuses on disasters, yet everyday safe operations rarely attract attention. Educational outreach helps balance perception by highlighting routine professionalism. Environmental stewardship increasingly forms part of maritime identity. Sustainable operation aligns with industry reputation. Policymakers weigh economic benefits, environmental impact, and safety considerations when shaping maritime regulations. Technological research continues seeking efficiency gains without compromising safety. Professional culture emphasizes preparation, observation, communication, and adaptability. And as shipping continues steadily despite inherent challenges, reflection naturally turns toward the broader relationship between water, human activity, and time itself, shaping how stories accumulate across generations, while maritime experience continues evolving without any clear final endpoint. And when you step back from all the technical details, the engineering discussions, the weather data, and the operational routines, what remains is a long, ongoing relationship between people and water that has been unfolding on the Great Lakes for generations. Ships come and go, technology changes, regulations evolve, yet the lakes themselves continue behaving according to physical rules that have stayed consistent far longer than any individual career or industrial era. That continuity shapes how maritime communities think about their work, their history, and their future. Water has always been a practical pathway first. Long before modern cargo ships existed, indigenous communities travelled these waters for trade, fishing, and seasonal movement. Canoes followed shoreline routes, river connections, and safe passages known through experience. Later, European settlers introduced larger sailing vessels, gradually expanding commercial transport. Each phase built on knowledge gathered from earlier travellers, sometimes formally recorded, often passed along informally through conversation and shared experience. Industrial expansion in the 19th and 20th centuries accelerated shipping dramatically. Iron ore shipments fueled steel production. Grain transport supported expanding agricultural markets. Timber, coal, stone, and manufactured goods followed established routes. Ports developed into industrial hubs. Shipyards expanded. Entire regional economies aligned with waterborne transportation because it made logistical and financial sense. With increased traffic came increased documentation. Shipping logs, harbour records, accident reports, engineering studies, and meteorological data created a growing archive of maritime experience. That archive does not remain static. Researchers, engineers, historians, and mariners continue adding to it each season. Patterns become clearer over time, not because the lakes change dramatically, but because observation improves. Stories attached to specific vessels often serve as entry points for broader understanding. A ship that sinks during a storm draws attention. Investigations follow. Engineering adjustments occur. Training programs update. The story becomes part of professional culture, reminding future crews about environmental realities without requiring dramatization. These narratives function less as cautionary tales and more as practical references embedded in everyday practice. Communities along the lakes maintain strong connections to shipping history. Museums preserve artifacts, memorials honour lost crews, educational programs explain how shipping works and why it matters. Public understanding grows gradually, especially in regions where maritime activity remains visible daily. Families involved in maritime professions often span multiple generations. Experience accumulated over decades becomes part of household conversation. Children grow up hearing about navigation challenges, seasonal weather shifts, cargo operations, and shipboard routines. That continuity reinforces respect for the lakes without turning them into something mysterious. Technological evolution continues shaping these stories. Satellite navigation, digital communication, automated monitoring systems, and advanced forecasting tools now form part of daily operations. Mariners rely on them while still maintaining traditional observational skills. The balance between technology and experience remains central to professional identity. Environmental monitoring also continues expanding. Water temperature records, ice coverage data, storm frequency analysis, and water level measurements provide long-term context. Scientists and mariners often collaborate because operational experience complements scientific measurement effectively. Shipwreck preservation adds another dimension to the narrative. Cold freshwater conditions keep many wrecks recognizable far longer than ocean wrecks. Divers, researchers, and historians treat them as historical resources. Documentation helps explain past ship design. cargo practices, and navigation techniques. Preservation also reinforces awareness that maritime work always involved calculated risk. Economic necessity continues driving shipping activity. Steel production, agriculture, construction, energy infrastructure, and manufacturing all depend on reliable bulk transport. Water routes remain efficient. That efficiency supports continued investment in port infrastructure, vessel design, and safety systems. Infrastructure modernization projects occur regularly. Locks receive upgrades. Navigation channels undergo dredging. Buoys and lighthouse systems receive maintenance. Weather monitoring stations expand coverage. These investments reflect recognition that shipping remains essential rather than optional. Regulatory frameworks evolve gradually. Safety standards adjust in response to new research, incident analysis, and technological capability. Cross-border cooperation between Canada and the United States ensures consistency across shared waters. That coordination supports efficient and safe operation. Environmental stewardship has become more prominent in recent decades. Emission standards, ballast water treatment requirements, and spill prevention protocols reflect growing ecological awareness. Maritime professionals increasingly view environmental protection as integral to responsible operation rather than an external requirement. Training institutions incorporate both historical knowledge and modern technology. Cadets study meteorology, hydrodynamics, engineering principles, communication protocols, and human factors. Simulator training exposes them to challenging scenarios in controlled environments. Practical sea time builds familiarity with real conditions. Psychological adaptation remains part of the story as well. Crews learn to maintain steady awareness without heightened anxiety. Routine procedures support stability. Communication within crews supports morale. Professional pride reinforces commitment to safe operation. Technological connectivity has changed life aboard ships. Satellite internet allows regular contact with family, access to news and educational resources. That connectivity reduces isolation compared with earlier eras while introducing new information management challenges. Public perception continues evolving. Awareness of Great Lakes shipping importance has grown through educational outreach, museum programs, and media coverage. Understanding tends to increase gradually rather than through sudden shifts. Scientific research continues exploring freshwater hydrodynamics, climate variability, corrosion processes, ecological interactions, and engineering resilience. Findings feed back into operational guidelines, infrastructure planning, and educational curricula. Insurance and financial sectors analyze maritime risk carefully. Historical data informs premium structures, investment decisions, and infrastructure funding priorities. Economic planning integrates safety considerations closely. Cultural identity around the lakes often includes maritime elements. Festivals, historical reenactments, port tours, and educational events reinforce community connection to shipping heritage. These activities support both tourism and professional recruitment. Environmental variability ensures that operational adaptation remains ongoing. Water levels rise and fall. Ice seasons vary. Storm patterns fluctuate. Mariners respond through planning flexibility rather than expecting complete predictability. Digital record-keeping preserves contemporary experience for future analysis. Voyage data recorders, maintenance logs, weather archives, and communication transcripts create detailed operational histories. Future generations will likely study these records much as current professionals study earlier logs. Technological redundancy remains a consistent design principle. Backup systems for navigation, communication, propulsion, and power supply reduce vulnerability. Regular testing ensures readiness when needed. Emergency preparedness continues improving. Rescue coordination networks, medical response capability, environmental containment equipment, and training exercises all support rapid response when incidents occur. Public safety education extends beyond commercial shipping. Recreational boaters receive guidance about cold water risk, weather awareness, life jacket use, and navigation preparation. This broader awareness reduces accident likelihood. Environmental monitoring informs both shipping and ecological management. Fisheries research, water quality studies, invasive species monitoring, and shoreline erosion analysis all intersect with maritime activity. Long-term planning considers infrastructure resilience. Ports adapt to water level variability. Breakwaters receive reinforcement. Ice-breaking capability adjusts to seasonal patterns. Investment reflects anticipation rather than reaction. Professional culture emphasizes humility toward natural forces. Even experienced mariners avoid assuming complete control. Preparation, observation, and adaptability form the core approach. Academic collaboration continues expanding internationally. Freshwater shipping research contributes to broader maritime science, climate research, and engineering development. Technological innovation remains ongoing. Alternative fuels, hybrid propulsion, autonomous navigation assistance, advanced materials, and predictive analytics all show potential influence on future operations. Historical continuity persists alongside innovation. Mariners still rely on fundamental principles: weather awareness, structural integrity, cargo stability, communication clarity, and teamwork. Public narratives about shipwrecks sometimes focus on dramatic elements, yet maritime professionals often emphasize routine success. Most voyages conclude safely because preparation works consistently. Preserved wrecks, active ships, modern ports, and historical records together create a layered picture rather than a single storyline. The lakes function simultaneously as transportation corridors, research environments, historical archives, and community landmarks. That layered reality continues developing quietly. Each voyage adds data. Each season contributes observation. Each generation refines understanding slightly. There is no clear endpoint to that process, only steady accumulation of experience as ships continue moving across these waters, carrying cargo, supporting economies, and adding their own small entries to the ongoing record shaped by water, time, and human activity.